Thank you, Phil. All right, it's 6:33. We'll start our SBC meeting. We'll call the meeting to order 6:33, and first order of business is present to speak. So again, if you'd like to speak, just take yourself off mute and we'd love to hear from you. Matt?
So, yeah, is it possible, I mean, these meetings are very long. Is it possible for you to schedule your executive session at the end of your agenda? Because for us public people, there's going to be a big gap. We don't know when you're going to come back. I have no idea. It's kind of difficult. So you can do that by simple majority vote tonight. So you can move it to the end if you can. Second thing is, I don't understand why the Board of Education hasn't approved educational specifications document. It doesn't make any sense to me. This isn't rocket science. Decide and approve the specs. Stop working with a draft. I don't understand why this is happening. I think the school building committee should formally request a final approved educational specifications document from the Board of Education. It's not that hard. I mean, I'm not an expert, an educational expert, but I don't understand what the holdup is. I made this request before. They seem to, I watched the Board of Education meeting online. Well, I watched parts of it. Yeah, I'm confused about what's going on here. I don't understand. Are we considering a 60,000 square foot building or an 80,000 or 90,000 square foot building? I don't understand this. Is the building size, is that the reason why we don't have approved education specifications from the Board of Education? Just from, someone who goes to some of these meetings, I try to go to all of them, but I can't make them all. But it's just very confusing about why these things are happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Anybody else present to speak? Again, just take yourself off mute and introduce yourself. Mike, can I come?
Catherine?
Yes. Can I?
Just something maybe for the good of the order. I don't think it fits in the agenda. So if you would humor me, I think based on the meeting 2 weeks ago, the meetings are running really long. I think we should do whatever we can to try to make them shorter. I think including me, we get repetitive about saying things. And I think we need to work actively to shorten up the meetings. I cannot do another 2.5 hour meeting, especially having Board of Finance again tomorrow night. I think we need to discuss important things, but we need to move.
Okay, we're still on present to speak. Is there anyone present to speak that would like to share your thoughts?
Nicholas Della, 49 Myrtle. I just want to say, I hope we're not going to start rushing through things because, they may go 2.5 hours. It is what it is. We wanted to serve the public. Got to suck it up. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Nick. Any other present to speak?
Catherine?
Yep, we're on present to speak. Yep.
Right. And I don't want to speak to the present to speak. I just want to do a good of the order thing like Mike. I like this approach. Can we do that, Catherine? Or should I ask at a different time? Just move the executive session to the end so all these people aren't waiting.
It is at the end.
Oh, okay. Great. Thanks. I wasn't sure where it was in number 8. Thanks.
Okay, any other present to speak? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to chairperson report. Yeah, so I would just encourage that if there are questions specifically about the educational specs, to attend the Board of Ed meetings and express your questions and concerns in that meeting. However, with that said, we are coordinating with the Board of Ed to get the final ed specs, and it is on our agenda. Every meeting that we have, it's on the agenda, and we get an update from our representative that's on the Board of Ed. So if you guys want to know more information about that, it'll be further down in this meeting. And as I mentioned, the executive session is one of the last items on this meeting, and we will get to that and try to address the issues in a timely manner. I don't want to rush through the meeting. It's important that we do cover it, but I do appreciate everyone's comments. So next item, approval of the meeting minutes. Is there a motion on the table on the floor? I can never figure out what it is, Mike, table or floor. Is there a motion in play for approval of the SBC meeting minutes of October 5th?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of 10:05 as presented.
Thank you, Erica. Second. Brianna. All right, let's take a vote. So all in favor, or actually discussion, any discussion? Mike?
Catherine, just to, if it helps clarify that even in this motions go on the floor, stopping them goes on the table. I mean, in the Roberts rules or in the British parlance, if you set something on the table, that means you're pausing, taking action on it.
Okay.
You've down onto the table. So that's just, if that helps at all.
I gotta write it on my hand or something because I can never get it right.
Yeah, putting it out on the floor means it's coming up, it's business. If you put it on the table, you're halting it.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor, a first and a second to approve the meeting minutes of October 5th. Any discussion on these meeting minutes? Okay, let's take a vote. So all in favor of approving the meeting minutes of October 5th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
All right, someone's got their phone, okay.
And
Moving down to communications, I don't have any communications update other than, I think we're gonna be talking about it further down, so. yeah.
so Catherine, I'm not sure where the appropriate place, I reached out to you earlier today about an item that had come up and so I was hoping to have, it's kind of a communication, so it's more an oral. That
Okay,
the committee had discussed the process for going back to town meeting for the $100,000 that had been requested from CIP.
yeah, the legal.
Yes, so
we
we
got
reached
some
out to the
legal-
town attorney and
Yeah.
absence any language, an ordinance, we do not have a charter, so there's no language in charter and language in statute that our town attorney's opinion, and I should be receiving that in writing from him, but his opinion to us was so long as we follow all of the steps to take it back to a town meeting, that we could do so. So back to the Board of Finance, this committee had already discussed moving forward with the request again, back to the Board of Finance for an appropriation and their recommendation for the Board of Selectmen to call a town meeting and then a town meeting. And so that's where we stand with that. So I think that was positive that we're able to take the item back to town meeting for the town's reconsideration.
Okay, and is the reason why we had to get the legal opinion because it went to town meeting and failed? Is that why?
Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that we knew the process, right? I couldn't find anything in statute that spoke, and so we wanted to be sure that before we took it back to town meeting, that we understood the full process. So some towns may have an ordinance or a charter that speaks to how those things would move forward. Absent that, the state statutes really are a baseline. And there's no language that tells you what to do, that you have to hold a town meeting in order for these things to happen, but nothing beyond that. So many towns will add to their procedure so that there's clarification, but absence that, the attorney's opinion was that there was nothing preventing us from making the request again. The Board of Finance possibly approving that appropriation and recommending the Board of Selectmen call a town meeting.
Great, thank you. I don't have any additional communications other than a report that we're going to see from the Finance Subcommittee next. Peter?
just have a question on communications, Catherine. So this sounds important to me, this letter from the attorney Erica references, because our request was rejected, and is that part of the record so that we can, say that we did this, or where is this? Shouldn't you have received it as a communication, Catherine? I'm thinking out loud.
Peter, I'm not sure if you heard me say in the beginning, our attorney gave me that verbally. I asked for it written. And so his hope was to have that before tonight, if not tomorrow's Board of Finance meeting. So we should have his actual opinion, but I
Okay,
did have a written communication to send out to you, which is why I'm sure Catherine didn't share it.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
a conversation. It wasn't anything that I.
I'm sorry, I must have misunderstood. So eventually it'll be a communication.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next item, subcommittee reports. We've got 3 subcommittees. One is communications, that's to share with our public community, and then land assessment subcommittee and finance committee. So why don't we start with any updates from the communications subcommittee?
We did not meet. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Ann.
Right, we have,
Got to mute one, Ann. I'll speak for her. We haven't met, but we did post the timeline that Scott had. So the timelines are posted on the website.
Perfect, thank you. And then just, we did update the Willington wire. I don't know if, I think we reported on that last week. But that, if you haven't had a chance to read it, it's a lot of information that we published. Thanks to the subcommittee. All right, land assessment subcommittee.
Land Assessment Subcommittee has not met since the last full committee meeting. I don't know that there are any updates. Catherine, you don't have anything, do you?
Further down in the executive session, we do have some updates. I think we're gonna cover it. And we may have covered it last time, but they, about the environmental phase 1 study.
That was discussed at the last meeting.
Yeah. So, and then we've got finance subcommittee.
Hi, everyone. We did not formally meet, but Catherine reminded me that a timely update would be good of our revenues and expenses. So I did obtain that. Can you do a screen share, Catherine, of it? Of the one I sent you?
I can, yep.
Great.
If I lose you guys, I might have to ask Phil to share it. Because here, let me try this. All right, can you guys see that?
Not yet.
No.
Route,
All right, is it circling?
circling.
All right,
Put it up if you'd like me to share it.
it's coming, it's coming.
You're muted.
Is
I'm-
Catherine still here?
Ask one of you to share it because unfortunately, this happens every time. I'm not sure why, but thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Erica. Great. So this is from our, I requested this from our finance office. And if you look at the top, it shows our $100,000 that we received in our first installment, if you will, from CIP. The year-to-date column, which is next, moving to the right, we've spent $27,787 to date. And that's the detail you see, everything from Peter Prouder on the enrollment through Colliers, the property valuation with Haggerty, and then more Colliers. We have encumbered or not yet spent $55,000 and $97 which is detailed in the second part of this chart or spreadsheet, which the bulk of you can see is the $45,000 to Colliers, and then those 2 environmental studies of each site. All that's to be billed yet, but we know it's coming, so to speak, leaving us with a balance of $17,114 in our kitty. There's a helpful note at the very bottom of this sheet where it shows our PO and contract to Scott the Colliers of $68,040. And that's a substantial hunk of our $100,000. And then below that, there's a notation showing this 100,000 approved, and we've received it. That's the money we're operating on. And then the second 100,000 that was approved in CIP, but not released by the town to us. And what Erica talked about, applying for approval by the town again. So that's where we are. We spent we spent a portion of our 100,000. We're encumbered for another 55,000 and change. We have a balance of 17,000 that we're operating on for future expenditures. And our second $100,000 is pending. Any questions? I have one suggestion, Catherine. Can we include this in our minutes? So if a townsperson says, what money do you have? What are you spending? What didn't you spend? Can we just attach this to our minutes? That way it's clear to anyone what our financial status is as a committee.
I'm gonna have to let Erica respond to that. I'm not sure if, is that,
I can't think of a reason why we couldn't. I think it would be up to this committee, not,
Well,
I can't give you any reason why it could not be. So I think it would be up to this committee.
it's
Not,
public. This is just public information I requested from the finance office.
Yeah.
And
I don't,
I don't want to be in a situation.
I think Bill wanted to.
Bill has his hand up, Bill?
I think that's a good idea, Peter. I also think we should post it on the website. Let's make it easy.
When you say that, Bill, where would it be on the BOE website?
So under the school building committee page, we could put it under there. It's just
Oh, okay.
finances as of 10/19 as a PDF. And
Great
then,
idea.
we could attach it to these minutes in addition to that. So it was in both places. I just don't want
like
to,
that. I like that.
I don't want them to have to find what minutes it was attached to. That's why
Oh,
I'm
gotcha.
proposing to put it on the
Gotcha.
website.
Okay, I would like that to be done so that there's no question about the properness of our finances.
Catherine, I have a question.
Go ahead, Erica. Thank you,
I-
Phil.
Thought we had, what I don't see encumbered is the monies that this board agreed on and took vote on for Halloran and Sage. It's not showing encumbered. And then the last line, you can see there was an invoice that came from Halloran and Sage in the amount of $703 that's pending committee approval. And so I just have a question. I know at our last meeting, October 5th, there was a motion for not to exceed 4,000. So that should certainly be shown encumbered. And then the monies, the first set of monies, which was the opinion on the Hall School deed, I think that should be recorded. So there's just maybe, I'm happy to work with the business manager to make sure those items get properly noted, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, Erica, I'm
Yeah,
fine with that. Yeah, in fact, the
It's
report
right
just,
at the bottom of the page.
right, but is that part of the number? It doesn't look like there was a PO or anything.
Because it says it says, so basically Donna
Okay, invoice,
received
yeah.
the invoice to pay the 703, but she has, it's not in the paid, so it has not been paid. They've received it, it's pending approval. But it's not even the 4,000 we did last year is not encumbered, and it should show encumbered similar to the Eagle environmental dollars.
Yeah,
So I think that's, just a housekeeping thing to be done. And
so we actually have less of a balance. I was gonna make those same comments, Erica, but if you could work with the business office to get those items on there, and then maybe, can you send us a updated report?
Yes, I'll ask her to send out a new report that then we could put on the website.
It's possible the second 4,000 that we voted on, I think it was last meeting or the meeting before, it's possible that the PO hasn't been issued to them yet. So, but we can, if you could ask the business manager, those two, that'd be great.
I can do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for the updates. Down to old business. Owner's project manager, Scott, I thought I saw you. Oh, there you are. If you want to go ahead and give us an update.
Sure. Thank you, Catherine. Good evening, everyone. Scott Pellman from Colliers Project Leaders. As you recall, at our last meeting, we filled in the committee on our meeting that we had with the state of Connecticut, specifically to understand clearly what the parameters were for identifying and budgeting a project prior to a grant submission. And based off that meeting, again, the state is contrary to what some comments came out of the department previously under a different administration. The state is not going to dictate what your project is. The building committee and through a town referendum will determine what project is submitted to the state for a grant application. And what we have been looking at, as you all are aware, is two options. Option one, which we're calling a new school on a new site, that hopefully I think we're getting very, very close to being able to publicly let everyone know where that is. And the second option is creating the pre-K through 8 school with additions and renovations on the site of the existing Hall Memorial School. With that, we did talk about, and as we talked about the last time, that the state space standard, and that the state, we had some very good discussions with the state, then they acknowledged the fact that the space standard using their current document really didn't adequately address enough square footage for a pre-K facility of 419 students. So we discussed the possibility of a space waiver. Again, the state will not comment on that. They won't allow us to submit anything prior to a grant application. But with that said, what Catherine had requested that I perform is looking at the options that we've discussed and doing some budgetary, creating some project budgets for those scenarios in two ways. One, prior to just utilizing the basic state methodology prior to submitting a grant and prior to requesting any type of a space waiver. And then based on our discussions, what we feel would be legitimate and what we could justify as far as a space waiver. So in essence, doing the budget estimate, the overall cost doesn't change, but the cost to the town is in essence a worst case scenario prior to submitting any kind of a space waiver, and then a best case scenario submitting a space waiver. And with that, I have been working very closely on a presentation, again, that kind of takes you from A to Z and explains the process. Been working very closely with Phil. He got me a little more information today. Our intent is to get the draft of that presentation to the committee a week from today. And our intent, based on committee feedback, would be to present the full presentation to the public. And again, hopefully with also with the land that has been identified as a possible building site the following week on or around November 2nd, which would be your next regularly scheduled meeting. So with that, again, Catherine had asked me to present those initial budgets, and I'll kind of just run through the two scenarios just to get this information on the table. And again, our intent is to have a much more detailed presentation that walks you through some of the state process, some of the ways that we calculate this, the schedules, the process of submitting And also I know that Phil is working on, to go along with this, potential cost savings. When you do consolidate two schools into one, there will be operational savings. That's certainly one of the advantages. Phil's working on that now. And if we don't have that ready in 2 weeks, shortly thereafter, where our intent is to be able to get that information out, as well as working with town financials to get a clear picture of what these options and scenarios would do to a mill rate. So with that long-winded introduction, I'm going to go ahead, if I can, Catherine, and
Yeah.
share my screen. And okay, hopefully, can everyone see the screen?
Not yet. It's coming. There you go.
Okay, there we go. All right, so within this chart, we have the four options. Option 1, which is a new school. Option 1A, which is a new school with the auditorium. And again, the discussion or thought there is that an auditorium, because it's extra cost, that might be a second part of a referendum question. One, if you want to approve the school, and then if you did approve the school, would you like to have an auditorium? We follow suit with the same process, same thought process here. Option 2 is the alterations extensions to Hall Memorial School, and those same alterations extensions with an auditorium. What I did do at the bottom of this is tried to, again, very high level, put an explanation. So the calculated reimbursement rates, and what I did is I've calculated out what percentages of the eligible construction the state would pay, and listed those. These first boxes is the estimated state funding, estimated cost of the town. This is kind of your worst case scenario. And then to the right, these two is estimated state fundings with a space waiver, and estimated cost to the town with that same space waiver. Again, the state will not allow us to file the space waiver till we've submitted the project for a grant application. So this shows, in essence, our understanding going in, submitting the grant. This shows you what our understanding, what our desire, what we feel is we've got a good case to go forward as far as the space waiver. So this shows, in essence, the best case scenario. Most likely the cost to the town will be somewhere between worst case and best case at this point. But so for calculating out these numbers, I'll just read the bottom. We calculate the state reimbursement rates above based on the initial rate for new construction. Now, Phil we just received the new rates from the state. Unfortunately, the state, I guess, believes that Willington is a richer community than they were last year because your rate has diminished slightly. So your new rate for new construction is 53.21%. And on an alteration renovation project would be 63.21%. You take those percentages and you multiply them by the state, the space standard reduction. So what the space standard reduction is the space standard right now says will, at the moment, before a space waiver, will give you just over 57 to 58,000 square feet as far as reimbursement. We'll reimburse you on that square footage. Again, I want to say that with the discussions with the state, looking at the program, there is absolutely no way you can build a school for 419 students, pre-K through 8, for 57,000 square feet. The state has agreed and acknowledged that, and we showed them that it absolutely will not work, and that's our basis for going through with a space waiver in the future. So it is reduced. You take the percentage or the square footage. There's a formulaic way of arriving at this, and you take the square footage that we're anticipating for the project, the Spec square footage. It's divided out by the state square footage that they will allow. It comes up with a percentage of reduction. That number then is multiplied by your initial rate, either the 53.21 or the 63.21% is reduced. Then that number, which are shown here, so for the new school option right now, the estimated state funding is 40.83%. And with a waiver, I believe we could get to the 53.21%. Now, there's one key factor here I'm gonna try and hopefully explain it. Those reimbursement rates are based and it says it here, on the total, and I highlighted in red, eligible construction cost. Not everything involved with a renovation project or a new construction project is eligible for state reimbursement. So the calculated percentage then, in this case, for our new school, prior to a space waiver, the state will pay 40.83% of the eligible construction cost. Now, for new construction, there's not a lot that wouldn't be eligible depending on what you do with a project. Anything over the property line, so bringing some of the utilities to the site, any additional curb cuts, road modifications you may have to make, so forth. Anything that is over the property line, the state will not pay for. And that happens on every project as an ineligible. So those are reduced. On the renovation project, anything that is a repair or replacement of an existing component of the building also does not qualify for state reimbursement unless you're able to achieve renovation status. And we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. So again, the percentage rate, if you took this 40.83%, and I know, probably Ralph is probably already punching his keyboard saying, well, Scott, the numbers don't work. 60, if you multiply 40.83% times 60 million, you're not going to get that number. The 40.83% is on the eligible construction cost. Trying to put another row in or more information into this, I felt was just going to be even more confusing. It is quite confusing on how to achieve these numbers. But so what this represents is 40.83% of what we estimate or anticipate as eligible construction results in state funding of 24,509,780. You subtract that number from the estimated budget for the new school option one, you have a remainder, or what would be the town share, of 36,124,473. Now, again, with a space waiver, and this would be a space waiver. This is the new school, again, without the auditorium. So the auditorium is estimated to be 8,000 square feet. So we take what's in the current ed spec less 8,000 square feet. We end up with 75,134. If we can get a space waiver for a school of 75,134, then our reimbursement rate is 53.21% of the eligible construction. That then jumps up the state reimbursement by about $7.4 million with a similar reduction to the town. So a best case scenario in this case, new school, $60.634 million would be a cost to the town of $28,693,000. So then the next exercise was to say is how would this be affected by a school with an auditorium? Well, certainly now an auditorium adds an extra 8,000 square feet. So you're going to see that the state funding percentage is reduced because now you're building even more square footage compared to the basis point of 57,000, 58,000 that the state says, this is all we're going to give you. So that reduces your reimbursement rate a little bit further. Also, we've encumbered the additional construction cost for building that auditorium. So we go from 60.6 to 66.5 to put that auditorium on the site, reduces our reimbursement rate. So now the estimated state funding portion is 23,210. Again, because that extra square footage is driving our rate down even further. Estimated cost to the town 43.3. Now with a space waiver, there's another factor here, and again, it's why I say it's complicated, but it's why you hired colleagues to help you through this process. The state will only build an auditorium or fund an auditorium for half your student population. So the state will fund, in the way we've looked at, is approximately 4 of the 8,000 square feet. So they would allow an auditorium of approximately 210 students. The current ed spec is looking to provide not only to the school but to the town an auditorium that would be able to house 425 people. either students or parents, staff, teachers, individuals. So when I looked at a best case space waiver, even though the ed spec is 83,134, I subtracted that 4,000 square feet. There's no way, knowing the state, Michelle Dixon and everyone up there, they are not going to pay 100%. It's right in their documents, it's in their statutes. They only build auditoriums for 50% of the student population. So I took that into account, recalculated with a space waiver of them allowing us 79,134 square feet. And this is the resulting number. So again, the state share goes from 30.9 to 50.65%. Again, we're at 53.21 without the auditorium, but because we're losing a little bit on that extra square footage and that percentage drops 50.65. Cost, the state would reimburse 31.858067. Cost to the town 34,706,283. Followed the same process through the alterations. Option 2, in this one now we're starting with a higher reimbursement rate. If you recall at the bottom when we talked about it, new construction, your starting percentage from the state, 53.21. Alteration renovation, your starting percentage from the state is 63.21. However, that does get affected by overall space. So you have to do the reduction because you're over in square footage. That reduces, in this scenario, your estimated state percentage of support to 47.37. And again, that now is calculated against the eligible construction cost. So again, we took the same percentage on the new construction, 1%, that we assumed, and again, looking at historical data on projects that we do a lot of these. I feel that that's a reasonable number to use. But the renovation alteration, I actually went pretty conservative, more so on benefit of the town, assume that 40%, we could justify 40% of those costs would be reimbursed by the state, 60% ineligible. Now, this is prior to applying for renovation status. Now, what renovation status would do is it would make all of those ineligible construction costs that are repair or replacement. Again, wouldn't do anything for you for anything over the property line, but anything that's a repair or replacement would make that potentially eligible for state reimbursement. There are some key factors to this. The most stringent is that you have to prove that a renovation addition project is less expensive than building new to achieve renovation status. And in this case, and without really diving fully down the rabbit hole this evening, you can see that the budget estimates right now work on alterations of Hall Memorial School in both instances are more expensive than building new. A lot of factors here. We're tearing down a good portion of the building. There's a lot of abatement costs associated with that. We're building a lot of new construction. The construction is phased, so the construction period, I believe in the schedules, it sounds like were posted on the town website, but we're anticipating just to get the academic areas completed, it's an additional year longer than it would take to build a new school. And to get the auditorium done, which facilitates the demolition of the two-story academic wing, it would take approximately another year. So from project start to project completion, the renovation alterations, because we're working on an existing site, very tight site, phased project, we're doing demolition, abatement, a whole bunch of components that don't exist for new construction. The new construction is less. And that's exactly why the state put that provision in place. They did not want to go to renovation status if it was going to be more expensive. The state is trying to be good stewards about the money they dole out to the communities. So I feel that renovation status in these two options would be a huge climb to try and get that approved. However, I did look in the same scenarios of a space waiver. And again, you can see that with a space waiver, without the auditorium, I've calculated approximately 63.21% of the eligible costs. But again, unfortunately, the eligible costs are much lower for the renovation than the new construction. And so you can see those numbers here. And then similar to option 2A with the auditorium, the reimbursement rate without a waiver, the reimbursement rate with the waiver. Again, I subtracted out 50% of the auditorium because the state will only fund half of the student body, half that auditorium. And these are the resulting costs. So I know that was a ton to throw at you. And again, Catherine wanted me to just at least share the numbers when we do our full presentation. We have a number of slides that talk about the state process, the state grant process that I think will visually, give you the bullet points of what I just threw at you very quickly. And with that, I'll turn it over to if there's any questions. And again, my intent is to share the draft of the presentation with the committee, and I will be providing for committee use some of the backup materials as well that helped derive these numbers so you can understand these a little bit further, but that's too much to get to within the public forum in this evening.
Thank you, Scott. Did you have any other updates besides the budget before we jump into questions?
No, I mean, just the budget, and really it's been the presentation and development of all the materials that I've been working on with Phil and yourself.
Okay, this was great. Thank you. It is definitely a complicated calculation, but I think you've done a nice job at presenting it. And the other thing is that particular slide, I believe, is going to be part of your presentation that Scott is going to share with the committee next week. And I think we'll take some questions. So we'll start with Ralph, and then we'll go to Erica and Gary.
Okay, some questions for Scott. With respect to the new building, does that include the land cost?
Yes, it does.
Right. Does it include contents?
Yes, it does.
Any furnishings, desks, et cetera, are all included?
Furnishings, desks, technology, security, printing fees, management fees, oversight, escalations, as far as inflation goes. It's the entire package, Ralph.
Okay. Then my last question has to do with Hall. The existing media center was once an auditorium. Do you know what the seating capacity would be if it was restored to be an auditorium?
It's about, just going on the study they did, it's about 24 to maybe 2,800 square feet. Taking the stage out, I would anticipate its seating capacity, looking at code and egress, probably in the neighborhood of 125 to 150 max. And that would be very tight without actually inserting seats into the space. When a new auditorium for 425, I've been running just around 8,000 square feet. And I provided Phil and the board 4 examples of constructed auditoriums with their square footages and seating capacities, all in that neighborhood of 4 to 425. And they're all in the range of 8,000 square feet. That old space, when we looked at what we could do with that, we were able to fit in 3 classrooms of approximately 800 square feet within that area, as from a redevelopment standpoint. So that's why I'm stating it's somewhere around 24 to 26, 2,800 square feet, compared to an 8,000 square foot auditorium that can seat 425 people.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, that'll work for now.
Thank you, Ralph. Erica?
Thank you. So I have a couple questions. Scott, do you ever see those ineligible costs on renovations change? You said they have to meet a certain criteria in order to be eligible. Once a project starts, does any of that ever change?
Well, it is because of change orders and other things. You're never going to know the exact amount going in, and we do try and be a slightly conservative. Again, I kind of gave you a worst case and a best case range. So again, I think you would be somewhere in between there. Every change order, until a change order is submitted to the state, is assumed ineligible for reimbursement. Then the state reviews it. We sit with the state, we go over every individual change order, and then they deem portions or all of that work eligible. So as part of the process, the total eligible construction costs are never exactly identified, although I must say we've got a very good track record of hitting or coming in below the anticipated cost to the districts on every project that I've been associated with in the past 5 years.
Okay. My next question is between option 1 and option 2, when you estimate the state funding with the waiver and the cost of the town with a waiver, you base the new school on 75,134 square feet and the renovation on the full amount of square footage. Maybe I apologize if I missed if you answered that. Why we wouldn't ask for the entire cost to be new construction eligible?
Well, the alteration project is a little bit more square footage as well.
Okay.
There are some inefficiencies of the existing building, and I worked very closely with Phil, taking their ed spec and putting boxes into the existing building, saying, okay, this existing room is, can fit the 5th grade. And this one can be used for OPP, PT. This can be a conference room or a teacher's workroom. So we inserted boxes, but there are some, you've got a very large boiler room. There's a very thin hallway that is a real challenge from a code standpoint, and some of those subterranean spaces. Your layout where you have the classrooms on each side on the 2nd floor of the gymnasium are single loaded corridors with a stair on each end. So in essence, to service 4 classrooms, you have 2 complete corridors and 4 stairs. So, and then those stairs compound because every level is a couple hundred square feet for those stairs. So there's inefficiencies. So we physically organized and put in as much of the program space as we could physically squeeze in to the existing building. Then I did an area takeoff of that, of what that remaining building area was. And then we looked at what it would take then, what were the remaining program that we couldn't fit into the building, that's the addition. Okay. So you'll see if you look at the numbers closely that actually the total square footage for the renovation is higher. I went though for the higher within the space waiver. I did apples to apples. I said if we were at 75,000, just over 75,000 for the basic option with auditorium, we're actually at about 82,000 for the renovation of hall. And I would go for a space waiver for the full area. The only reduction in a space waiver that was used in this calculation was just half the auditorium, or in each case subtracting 4,000 square feet.
Thank you. And then my last question is less a question for you, but more a comment. And if you can weigh in on it. State reimbursement rates are all public information. You can see ours went down. Our neighbors in Ashford for new construction are 55.36. And our partners at Region 19 sit at 71.07%. Do you have any idea why there's such a disparity between the towns and our region?
I just live by the numbers, how they do the ERG and how the legislature works their magic behind the scenes. Honestly, Erica, I couldn't tell you. I do know in some instances, there have been legislative bills put on that have adjusted some of those numbers. I know that's been a point of contention with the state in the past, but I do know that when you see some of these unusual numbers, there may be something that happened in the legislature to support that. But I unfortunately, I can't comment on any further. They give us the published numbers and those are the numbers we work with.
And just Mansfield is 65.72 folks. So there are definitely some questions in ability to pay between Willington, Ashford, and Mansfield. So, okay.
Understood. And it's a great question maybe for the state and for your representatives of, hey, representatives, this doesn't make sense to us. What's going on? Maybe they can shed some light on it. I think that's a great observation.
Fire off an email. Thank you.
Yeah,
Catherine.
I think that's a good idea. Well, Gary's next, Mike.
I
so-
just want to answer that question though. Just a quick comment on that question.
Okay.
I had heard anecdotally, not from 100% reliable source, but I had heard that one of the factors was there's a reward in the system for regionalization, which was why Region 19 has a higher reimbursement rate because they're being rewarded for regional. I don't know how that applies. Again, there's mystery, and And I don't know if that's 100% true, but the person who told me that was quite sure. We'll
And we
say.
should be rewarded for combining to one school, Willington.
Thank you.
Like,
That'd be my
the other-
argument.
Send
The
your
other
email
regional
out,
school
though.
districts, the other regional school districts do not look like Region 19. I will tell you that. They are at least 10% higher.
All
Interesting.
right, Gary. Go ahead, Gary.
Thank you. It's well, first of all, thank you for the presentation, Scott. Not really a question, but just a comment about this, the way that the information is conveyed. And I know you said you're going to do a whole slideshow show, so maybe this won't be an issue, but I would definitely make sure it's clear that you have the cost, and then you have the cost with the waiver and the reimbursement perhaps with the waiver. But I would just note that the first number is without any waiver at all. I think that can be confusing for people, and you probably would include that in the slides, but
I could absolutely add the words without waiver if you think
Yeah.
that would be clear. I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you,
I
Gary.
do. Yeah, I was thinking
No
that the whole
waiver.
time. Thank you.
Yeah,
And that's why I want to get this presentation to the committee next week for that exact type of input, because, you know, I've been working on it for a while. You get so used to looking at it, a fresh set of eyes. That's a great observation.
Can I add to that, Scott?
Yep.
One thing, and I looked at that too, is that it might make sense to make that column a separate color so people hone in on that particular column, because let's face it, without the space waiver, it is that column.
yeah. All right, any other questions? I'm gonna jump to you in a second, Ralph. Let's just see. Peter?
Two questions, if I may, Scott. The first is, I assume that the best case scenario with the waiver would not be available to us going to referendum. That if we went to referendum, we'd have to assume the worst case scenario with the town bearing the entire burden. And then if something favorable happens after referendum, prior to our application to the state, that would be a good situation. Am I correct in understanding that?
Yeah, unfortunately, you are correct. And we pushed the state very hard on this. And I know I don't recall the specific community, but they mentioned a community that was in a very similar situation to yours. I mean, not a wealthy community, certainly that needs all the state support they could get. I believe after they filed the grant application, that specific community did get additional support. However, the state will not guarantee or even entertain until you've passed your referendum and put in your grant application. So it's a chicken and egg thing. And they're throw their hands up and say, this is the way it's done. And, we'll work with you after, but you've got to submit the grant first and you've got to pass it at the worst case. So yeah, unfortunately, you are correct.
Understood. My second question regarding the renovation option is, what percentage would, just at a glance, would you say represents the longer period, the higher cost that you're showing? What percentage of that is the extended period of construction because you're placing Hall School in a situation where we have school occurring there as well as construction occurring there?
Well, again, I mean, I think the schedule will show it. I mean, just to get the academic areas done, it's approximately a year additional. And to then get the auditorium done, again, because you have to move the kids into an area, renovate or build a new area, then move the kids around again. We can't build the auditorium until all of the renovated areas of the new construction is complete. Then you move the kids out of the last current academic wing that's adjacent to Route 34 or Route 32, I apologize, the two-story academic wing that was added on to Hall Memorial, the original building, that gets demolished. And then that is where your auditorium would be built, again, because you just don't have the space. Now with the new construction, adding an additional 8,000 square feet out the gate, whether it's the 75,000 or the 83,000 square feet, we feel more than comfortable. We have, I believe, 20 months allocated for construction to get that school complete. And that building could be completed in the same time period because you're starting all from new, ground up, moving that phasing and that domino effect that you get with a renovation.
I understand. I'm just curious what a ballpark percentage would be of that cost you're showing for the extended construction period and the complexity of the construction with swing space in the same location.
It's a very intertwined. I mean, we are projecting 5.5% a year escalations, and we go to midpoint of construction. We don't go to the end, but we go to midpoint of construction. So,
That's helpful.
you know, that is one factor. Renovation costs are less than new construction. There's a whole bunch of factors that go in, but yeah, that is the apples to apples escalation that we're using right now.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Peter. Ralph?
Scott, with respect to Hall, do you have you have plan sketches of how the building will be laid out in each phase? That's one question. Second question, what are you carrying for contingency on either option?
Those are all included, yeah, in the overall budgets. I'm carrying in the renovations a little bit more because you don't know what you're getting into. 7%, I believe, with 2.5% for all soft costs, which includes your FF&E, furniture, and technology. New construction, 5% construction, 2.5% on soft costs.
Okay. Did you give any consideration to demolition of the classrooms on the north side of the gym and repurposing that space for back of the house and moving the classroom spaces on the north side to the south side so that we can mitigate the corridor issue on the lower level?
You're getting down into the details. I mean, again, you're talking about a single loaded corridor. To make it a double loaded corridor, you'd have to create a new corridor on the outside of the building and build classrooms outside of that. That's the area that really only works for loading zone. Again, we're not looking to, as with the new construction, you know, we're not looking to design, as we've talked about, what those costs and fees would be to get a very specific design. We've looked at overall square footages, viability of the options, and what the costs of those square footages are. We have not gotten to the level of detail of doing, you know, detailed construction phasing plans. Again, I have done a lot of this type of work over the years. I feel comfortable in the schedule presented, looking at the time, but to build a new 2-story addition, granted that it's smaller, Ralph, if you look on the schedule, we've allocated 18 months to that. There's an early site phase because we have to relocate the septic field that's in that location for the major addition. But I think 18 months is absolutely doable. You know, I don't think you're going to do much better than that. Again, we're looking at, you know, 20 months for the overall new construction of the new building. And then you've got your existing gymnasium, your existing cafeteria, kitchen. Those areas have to be used academically. We can't put up a temporary gymnasium or caf or kitchen. So those areas have to be done under the summers. So within the schedule, again, if you look at the schedule, I believe that's been posted or will be included in the draft presentation I provide next week, you have 2 summers once the new addition is done to start addressing that work.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. I don't think you answered my question very well. I would like to see floor plans for what could be done with Hall so that we could possibly look at ways to reduce the cost within the existing, which obviously is going to be higher, and put that space into new construction on the south side where unit costs are likely to be lower because we're dealing with new rather than existing. That's why I think some sketchy plans for Hall is essential to pinning down the cost.
Well, and I do believe the plans that I worked on with Phil in the original ed spec of inserting the spaces into the existing buildings were shared with you, Ralph. So you have seen those.
I haven't seen them.
When you came to my office.
I didn't see detailed plans, and quite frankly, since I was not allowed to take them home, I'm relying on my memory, which is not necessarily photographic and a perfect. I would like to see some plans, and I think we're going to need to present some plans to the townspeople who are going to have to foot the bill for any project.
Right, so we are talking about the budget, and, you know, we're kind of tapping into the design, which is all good conversation. I just, at this point, I don't know that having a detailed layout of of where the hallway is going to be, where the restrooms are going to be, and all that is really going to change the numbers. We're really coming up with the numbers on a square footage, not to dismiss your comments, Ralph. I think they're worth exploring, but I think for this discussion tonight regarding the budget and the estimates that Scott has put together to give us a ballpark of how much this school is going to cost or renovation is going to cost, I think we need to stay on task here. Certainly, as we get further into the design options, I'm sure that your suggestions will be looked at, but it's just about the timing right now. Ralph, did you have any other questions about the budget?
No, I'm being summarily dismissed. That's okay. Go ahead.
Erica?
Thanks, Catherine. I have two follow-up questions based on Peter and Ralph's comments. So the contingencies you spoke about, are any of those percentages dictated by the state?
No.
And I know sometimes we do projects and they dictate what we have in contingencies if we use for their grants.
No, but the state, you do have to file specific estimates with the state. They will review those estimates and comment if they think, you know, for lack of a better term, you're building a Taj Mahal.
Okay.
You know, if your construction costs, they will look. You are required to file on a state website as part of your grant the public school construction cost database, and there will be a grant submission as well as another form of estimate filed with the grant. And so the state will review your total projected costs and they will comment on that.
Okay.
Yeah, what the percentages that I noted for both the renovation and construction are percentages that we recommend to you know, all the communities that we work with. Certainly, if there were mitigating factors, we might in fact increase some of those. You know, if there was some additional concerns. At this stage, I feel comfortable with the way they were presented.
I like the numbers. Don't get me wrong. With some state grants, the contingency amounts in my mind are out of control. So I like those numbers. To follow up on Peter's conversation about costs and the length of time of the project, I think I know the answer to this, but I don't want to assume. If we were to use swing space, i.e. portable buildings, to shorten the time frame, would that level out some of those costs, or is it?
Well, I know we talked about that with Phil. Unfortunately, portable classrooms, one, aren't reimbursed by the state. So that would be of cost. Two, on the existing Hall School, trying to find areas to place portables with the amount of pushing of the dirt and the material over to try and get your ball fields in place, relocating the septic field, bringing in construction trailers, lay down area, and construction staging, which is also going to be very challenging. You know, for a couple years of time, the students are really not going to have any real aspect of a field available for them on that site. So I think logistically, trying to place those on the site would be a challenge. Financially, they're not reimbursed. And then certainly from a security standpoint, the state really frowns on it. I agree with the state. From a management standpoint, unless you can connect portables with a fixed corridor to your existing building, sending students outside of your secure perimeter in this day and age is something I would highly avoid.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, you had your hand up?
I did, Catherine, thank you. I just want to express my concern and I guess disappointment that we're closing off some of the suggestions Ralph is making by saying, well, this is just a financial assessment of our options. And I'm hoping that before we go to the public, that we can go beyond just the financial estimates of both potential projects and look at some of the variables that Scott has behind all of this and understand it better. And I think that's particularly true, as Ralph says, for the renovation option, because it's not a generic new building. There are many different ways to go. And I know that's later on in our agenda where we might want to seek some assistance there, but I don't like the idea of closing us off to anything because the town clearly indicated a preference for a twin track here. And I feel that's happening. Thank you.
Peter, if I can just clarify, and if you heard, if everybody heard what I had said, I wasn't closing off what Ralph had suggested. I said it was about the timing. Tonight, we're trying to stay on task as some people are concerned about the time of the meeting. And this topic that we are talking about is related to Scott's update with the budget. Okay, we're accepting questions and comments about the budget, about the square footages. Ralph's got some good points, and I'm sure a lot of other people have some good points about the design. I myself, with an architectural background, I have some good points to bring up, but it's not the time. This is not the right timing. It's not about dismissing anybody's comments. Ralph can write those questions in an email. We can send them to Scott and Scott can review them. He's our owner's project management. He can review those for us. So, and Ralph's not even listening. He's walked off. So I'm sorry if he's offended, but we're trying to stay on task here.
I did not walk off, yeah. I'm still
Okay,
here.
well, I can't see you, buddy.
Yeah,
I can't see you.
just if I may, I mean, I think we need to just be careful in the verbiage that we use. That what I put together were concepts that
Right.
demonstrated putting boxes into your existing box and then saying, this is the remaining square footage. It truly is not a fully vetted design.
Right.
So I think we just want to, we don't want to sell the process of what I've done as a design. It's a concept. It was a test fit to see, again, how much of that square footage we could fit into that existing building. And it also had to make a logical sense. So I spent time with Phil and, you know, from a grade standpoint of how much could we put on the upper floor? How much could we put, and do those spaces make sense working next to each other from an educational standpoint? So all of that was part of the process of how much we could put into the remaining Hall Memorial School. And then again, that remainder just became, we need to build X square feet. And I believe that we can do it within that area that's been designated on the concept plans.
Thank you, Scott. I do have one question very specific about the reimbursement rate. And it's specific to the auditorium where you had mentioned, Scott, that the state has something in their statute where they'll only reimburse 50% of the school population. Is there a waiver? Is that something that we could tally into? No.
Every municipality is just gone after, tried, posed that question. It's been a resounding no across the board. And if they open that up for Willington, everyone else would jump on that. Every town would build, you know, in essence, the state says you're building something larger than you really need, in their opinion. Not in my opinion, not in your opinion, certainly, or the board's opinion as far as the ed spec. No, that is not anything that I feel would have any chance of moving forward in a positive
Oh,
way.
and I thank you. I asked that because if we're putting together a justification for stating to the state that, hey, your calculation worksheet does not work for us. I'm just wondering, why couldn't we run that same calculation and use the same reason? Like, it doesn't work for us, not only for our base square footage, but for an auditorium square footage as well.
Yeah, but in this instance, we're talking about making a justification on raw educational square footage versus an auditorium, which is a wonderful facility and component to have available to a school. But again, they're very strict and said, we will give you one that's sized for half your student population. Now, what we normally discuss or talk about is if you have a gymnasium, as you would in a middle school, you know, potentially what we've done in other communities that have said, okay, we're only going to build an auditorium to that half student population. We said, let's make sure we have enough bleachers or area on a floor where we can have a full student assembly with the students on the bleachers in the gymnasium. So that's the way a lot of other communities get around it. But again, when you start getting down talking about smaller numbers, looking at the use of an auditorium, you know, that only seats 200 versus one that seats 400, I believe that it opens up a lot more possibilities for the community at large.
Yeah.
If it's a little bit larger in this case than size to the half student population.
All right, great. Thank you. Were there any other questions about the summary that Scott gave before we move on?
One, Catherine.
Go ahead, Peter.
So how do we get access to this presentation and then some of the underlying assumptions that Scott talked about?
I will be sending that. I've still got some work to do on implementing or inserting some things that Phil and I are working on. But the intent would be to send it to you within the next week, at least a week prior to having it go out to the public. So the committee would have a chance to review and comment.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments before we move on? All right, let's move on. So old business, item B, community outreach task group. We did have the latest submission and we received some feedback from the committee members. So the presentation is in our presentation. Scott has his own presentation, which will get into a lot more details and options. But this outreach task group will talk about the school building committee, when it was created, how long we've been meeting, how to get access to meeting minutes, how to ask questions via email, what we've done, what we've accomplished, and where we're going. So that presentation will go out to the committee here in the next couple days, and then by next week we're going to publish it to the public. So we're making good progress on that. So if you do have comments when you get it in your emails, please promptly, if you have any edits or comments that you want to make, please promptly get those to me, because I am going to be sending it out publicly next week. Next item, C, educational.
Catherine. Oh,
yeah, go ahead,
just
Peter.
a quick timeout. I understand you're going to send this document to us so we can see it. I'm not on the committee, so I haven't seen it. Will we approve this as a committee or just going out, as you say?
I'll receive comments from you guys. So once you get it in your email, if you have comments, input, send them to me in an email. But it doesn't need to get formally voted on. Just like when we had the task group for the RFP for Scott's services, the task group prepared it and then it got published. It got solicited. So I don't believe we have to vote on this. But if you have comments, when we send it to you, if you have comments, just send your comments to me. So the entire committee will have an opportunity to look at it if that's what you're asking. Does that answer your question? Is he frozen or?
I think the answer is no, the committee will not vote on it. You will just send it out. Am I correct?
It'll be sent to the committee and you guys will have an opportunity to make comments on it before it gets published. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments before we move on? Brianna?
I just wanted to ask, what is the soonest we could have a town meeting? Do you know, Erica?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of meeting we have and the formal notice, right? So a town meeting and the need for legal requirements, I think is very different than some of these public hearings. So we, public input sessions. So it would be up to this committee, I think, to determine that. It's the process would be more flexible. And so it would depend on availability of where we have it and the folks that would be presenting.
Okay,
So,
I'm just trying to think, because you got the go ahead, so to speak, from the lawyer about going back and trying again.
oh,
In my
you
head,
need a meeting for that.
yeah, so I'm
we're
just trying
kind
to,
of out of order here. Can you?
sorry. It
Yeah,
has to do with the timeline for the community outreach presentation being released publicly, because I want to know if that's going to be out and done before we have to go to town meeting. and if what other information our townsfolk will have before they go to that meeting, because it is my suspicion that they were not informed or did not have what they need to make a decision to the best of their understanding of what we've been doing. And I think those two pieces of information, Scott's presentation, the communication for the community outreach, that's important information for them to have in order to make an informed decision. So that's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
Okay.
Brianna, that's very different than I think what I was answering before. So
Yeah, so
the
thank
Board
you
of Finance
for
would,
giving
yeah,
a
the
little
Board of
bit of
Finance would
history.
first have to move on an appropriation and asking the Board of Selectmen to hold a town meeting. Our next meeting is until November 7th. And then the earliest it could be, if there was a call prepared at that meeting, would be at least 2 weeks. So I think if Catherine's saying in the next couple of days, the committee would get this, and then maybe next week it would go out, I think that would be well in advance of any town meeting.
It sounds like Scott's presentation will be happening prior to that also. Is that right?
Yes.
And I think if I may, the intent, I think, of the schedule was to have if you're talking about town meeting to approve a project, would happen into the new year sometime, probably
that's
closer
not
to the
what-
end of February, if that's okay.
No,
But
it's
I just want to make it clear that there'll be numbers of opportunities for the public to review the presentation live, ask questions, and those questions to be responded to before anything is formally put in front of the community as a town meeting to make a decision as far as
Yeah, I think-
project related.
I think what Brianna is asking is before we go back to town meeting with the request for the additional 100,000,
Okay, I got you. I'm
Um,
sorry.
what will the public have in hand that would help them to vote on that? Right, Brianna? Is that what you're asking?
That sounded way better. Yes. That's what I mean.
I'm
Thanks.
sorry, I didn't understand why you were asking that question. It was kind of commingled with something else, so thank you for
Sorry.
the information. All right, Mike?
First to Pete's concern about the committee approval of the outreach presentation. I don't know if this helps him at all, but at least the one thing that makes it a little less, I'm not sure what the right word is, but a little less in need of approval or whatever, is that it's essentially just an update of how we've got to where we are. So it's all information that's already in the public domain. I'm not sure if that makes him feel any better about it or not. And then the other thing to the question of our sort of life cycle of getting back to the $100,000 request and all this other stuff. The next Board of Finance, the next regular scheduled Board of Finance meeting that this could come up with is a month away. So we would need to, if we want to get it to the selectmen next month, it would have to be, we'd have to call a special meeting of the Board of Finance, which is not a problem to do that at all. We've called special meetings many times for issues like this. But it's not on the, I don't believe it's, I mean, I wrote the agenda for tomorrow night. Is it on the agenda? I don't think.
Put it on. It's the item that was asked to be put on, knowing that we were having a meeting tonight and that, so that's the earliest it could possibly go forward.
Well, I wrote it on this computer. I know there were last minute edits. I guess I can open it right now. Hang on. I'm looking at it right now. Oh, yes, indeed. I'm sorry. That was the last edit that happened. Okay, I apologize for that. That edit I had issued. Yes, now I remember.
And that's assuming you were to vote in favor. So that's the earliest it could be. Otherwise, we have to wait another month. So, yeah.
Yes, so it is on the agenda for tomorrow night for Board of Finance. I'm sorry.
And you should have information to support that, Mike, in an email.
Yes, I got that information from you this evening. Thank you.
Okay, Brianna, any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Were there any other questions about, I think we're on the community outreach task group. And then before we get an update from Phil. All right, hearing none. So Phil, could you give us an update on the ed specs, please?
Yep, so I will share my screen really fast. I'm not going to do a full presentation on this because I did it last board meeting. Their last process that they went through was to go through, you can see my screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Was to go through the environment, systems and equipment. So building systems, heating and cooling, climate, ventilation, lighting, electrical, technology, security, foam, public address, all of these items. This was the final piece for them. And so they had discussions on that. I am in the final edits of several things right now. One is a presentation with Scott. That's the big one. We are in the final edits of the ed spec that it will be on the agenda for the board to approve in their November meeting. But I do have permission once the ed spec is expected to go out to the board at the latest next Tuesday. It will be emailed out to them. It will also go out to, at that point, go out to the SBC committee, and it will also be posted online as a draft because it was not approved yet. But it's all the same details that we've been talking about in every Board of Ed meeting that we've been talking about ed specs. It is the 83,134 is still the same number. Really what they've been finalizing is the details of more of the written components, not necessarily the square footage. So that was the last component. I did reach out to one of the two members so far. I said I would share the ed spec with who has some experience with that. They have agreed to take a peek at it. So I will send it to them, and I still have one more person to reach out to just to share it, just to see if there's any other feedback from what I'll call professionals in that particular area. So beyond information that Scott's given me and actually Novus has given me as well. So that is my update.
Thank you, Phil. And it was emailed to the committee as well, right?
It will be. It's not yet.
I thought I saw, okay.
Well, you have an older version. I've shared some of it, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, any questions about the ed spec update before we move on? Okay, let's
Will
go.
this remain on our agenda, Catherine?
I'm sorry?
Will this remain on our agenda? Ed specs?
Until they're issued, yes.
Then I'll,
Until
I have some input there, but I don't want to burden the schedule tonight, so I'll wait till the next opportunity. But I would like to have time available to discuss the ed specs and their impact on this project because I think it's significant. I will not do so tonight.
Thank you, Peter. All right, let's move on to new business. Recommendation to have selectmen study the town buildings. So this item came up as a result of trying to figure out, depending on which option we go with. If we go with a new school, new site, then essentially hall goes back to the foundation, center school becomes vacant. If we do the renovation, hall becomes hall, improved, and then center is still displaced or becomes vacant. So with that said, there's been a lot of questions about what's going to happen to the buildings if we build a new school, or what's going to happen to center if we renovate hall. And so with that said, I would like to make a motion for discussion to request that the Board of Selectmen conduct a study of the existing town buildings for future use so that we can try to get some of these questions answered. So so my motion is on the.
I will second for discussion purposes.
Thank you, Peter. All right, let's jump into discussion. Peter, do you want to start?
Certainly. I don't think our committee needs to advise the Board of Selectmen on studying town buildings. They always have that opportunity. They have done so in the past with the fire department buildings and public works, and center school is yet another building. So I'm uncomfortable with recommending that they study any of our buildings. That's really their prerogative. What I think is important is to recognize that center school represents a cost to this project. If we in fact build a new school on a new site, then the cost of, as you said, put it so well, Catherine, vacating center school or retiring center school becomes a real cost for us. And just from my personal point of view, I think it's unlikely the town can afford a $60 million school project and then another umpteen $1 million project doing something, as it's often phrased, with a vacated school building.
Thank you, Peter. How will we know, how will we know what those cost impacts are if we don't ask the town to take a look at it as a result of what we're making a decision on, whether option A or option 1 and option 2? How are we going to know what those costs are if we don't ask the Board of Selectmen or the town to evaluate specifically center? I without a doubt, I'm sure the town has already looked at existing buildings, but because we're causing a change in the town facilities, we need to ask them specifically to look at what is going to happen with center and what would those costs be. So that's why I made the motion, but I appreciate your feedback. Any other comments, Anne? I'm sorry, I'm going to go to Erica.
I'll make mine quick. So Peter, to your point, that is in the selectmen's purview. And I mentioned to this group before that last year in CIP, because of the discussions here at SBC and the potential projects and the potential vacancy of center school, that I've already requested funding for a townwide facility study, because this will make us look at all of our facilities. And so we've actually got, hopefully funding will move up into year 1 and we'll be able to do that. And we may or may not have a referendum that tells us what direction we're going in by the time that comes around. The charge of this committee was to identify some potential uses. So I think taking some of the discussions we had before, and if we want to have a discussion, a separate about those potential uses and send that in a communication to the selectmen to use in a potential study, I think that would be appropriate.
Thank you, Erica. Anne?
I think Erica answered my question. My question was, had the Board of Selectmen suggested that they would like to take a look at this? So Erica answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Peter, did you have any other questions based on what Erica just gave us?
No, I do. No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we have a first and a second, and we had a discussion. Is there any other discussion before we vote? All right, let's take a vote. Oh, I saw something, Ralph. Go ahead.
What exactly are we voting on? Can you run that past me again, just so I'm clear?
Yep, so I made a motion to request that the Board of Selectmen conduct a study of existing town buildings for future use.
Are we going to get some cost evaluations out of that as well?
Are you
I think that's
requesting
pertinent.
friendly amendment?
Can I comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Erica.
The reality is I don't see before we move forward with a potential referendum, that study being conducted. That includes, it needs funding. And it's not funding that we have for in this current budget, and it will take some time. So the reality is that study, at least the funding that I had asked for, was not prior to a referendum. It was as a result of some potential change in use of our facilities. We need to look at all of our facilities. So if the intent of your motion, Catherine, was to ask the selectmen to do a study to provide feedback as we move through this process, I just don't know when that could possibly happen.
Okay, Ralph, does that answer your question, or do you have an additional question?
No, I'm just concerned that the taxpayers are going to get hit with some costs after the fact that are not being addressed as part of the whole picture with respect to the financial implications of the school, the abandonment of 1 or 2 buildings, et cetera. So that's my concern.
Are you requesting a friendly amendment to include the costs
I'm not
of the,
suggesting
of the study? No,
Making an observation that I think there's some hidden costs here to the taxpayers that will not come to light until after the fact, and I have concerns about that.
well, which is why the request is being made to do the study now.
I understand, but we're not going to have those numbers when it comes time to decide on what to do with the school. So, all right, just
Mike,
commenting.
Thank you. Mike, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I think based on the timeline within the capabilities of the town to act on this, I think that this could potentially help inform us a little further down the road as we're further along in the charge of the committee. But based on the milestones and the timeline that we're at least looking at right now, and if we were to try to keep things rolling for the June 23 application date, I don't see the town being able to move with enough information to really benefit us. I think we're going to have to work within our charge to do what we can do in that time, which would certainly be limited, but what we can do to help advise the taxpayers as they make decisions. Because again, as Erica said and all that, by the time you procure funding and then you do an RFP, get bids back, review the bids, hire on a firm to do it, that's months of process right there, assuming that the funding is available at, right away. So I don't know that that process will inform our process early enough, but it might help us later. We're just going to have to do our work within our charge to try to present a good package through our work or through our consultant.
Right, Mike, good point.
Thank you,
I
Mike.
think the scope of our study would be very different if we didn't have a school project.
Right.
So,
Which
doing
is
it
why I'm
now is
requesting, yeah.
preliminary, I think. So,
Which is why I'm requesting it specifically from the school building committee to the Board of Selectmen. And it sounds like, does somebody have their hand up, Phil?
I do. I can go? Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
thanks. I think from the word study can be taken a lot of different ways. I don't know that we have formally heard from the selectmen that, our job was to make a recommendation, right? Some ideas about what these buildings could be used for if they were no longer schools. If we heard from the selectmen back, formal study that costs money or not, yes, we are interested in utilizing Center School as a future town hall if there is a school building project. I think that ends our conversation, our job as part of the charge for what we would recommend. They have to know the dollar amount. They won't know that yet, but at least if we heard that, that would help us with our recommendation. And maybe the study comment, Erica, is simply, do we believe this would be an option we would want to pursue as a town, as selectmen? Maybe that's just the simple version of the word study that we would need to hear for as an SBC, just to check a box for us. Hall school, I think, is a different story.
if I could offer a friendly amendment, it's to consider a study. And
Yeah.
that gives the throws it to
Instead
the
of conduct, but consider.
right to have a conversation that then we could report back to you on.
I mean, I can do one of two things. I can withdraw my motion and then just send you an email or send the Board of Selectmen an email and get some correspondence that way.
I think if that's easy, and if the group is in consensus, it's easy enough to, I can tell you that based on this conversation, I'm going to put it on a future agenda if it's not the next one, one after that. So I'll leave that to you.
Okay, it sounds like there's some mixed feelings about conducting a study about the timing of it. And so I will withdraw my motion and I'll send an email directly to the Board of Selectmen requesting some information about the intent of Center School. All right, moving on to item B, consideration to move to a hybrid meeting format. believe this was Erica.
I'm just going to jump right in with a motion. I'd like to move that we, moving forward, hold all of our meetings in a hybrid format.
Second.
And my discussion, I feel like a broken record. We are all, most of us I can see, unless we're using fake backgrounds in our homes here in Willington, with the exception of Mr. Chalona. I'm not sure where he resides, and Scott. But I think we are all out and about. We are all back to regular lives. This is certainly convenient, but I think it's important for us to be in the room. My idea of the hybrid format for public meetings is mostly for the public and giving them greater access. But I would like to see boards and commissions back in person, in the room together. It's up to each board and commission. And as I said on this one, I encourage us to get back into the room as many of us as possible.
Thank you, Erica. So for discussion purposes, there any discussion on this item? Mike?
I agree with the idea of getting as many of the commission members, or I'm sorry, committee members in person as is possible. There are definitely conveniences of this format, especially for the public, but there's value to having as many humans as possible in the same room too. So I think we should move to hybrid.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else? All right, let's take a vote. So all in favor of moving the current SBC meetings to a hybrid format, say aye.
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 Ralph, are you and I?
I was an aye.
Thank you. Any nays? Any abstentions? Abstention, Ann?
Can I share my concern? What the hybrid meetings that I did participate.
I'm sorry, point of order, that there's
Yeah, we
an item on the floor that's to be voted on. Discussion's over. Ann could explain her vote afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
So let's do the vote again, because I didn't get Ann's vote. So all in favor of moving to a hybrid format for our future school building committees, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? You're abstaining, Ann?
Yes.
Okay, we need to go to roll call vote. So start with myself. I'm an aye. Peter?
Aye.
Brianna?
Aye.
Chris Talona? Gary?
Aye.
Erica?
Aye.
Ann?
Abstain.
Mike?
Aye.
Ralph?
Aye.
Okay, I think that was it. Thank you. So motion carries. Moving forward, we will do a hybrid format for our school building committees. All right, moving forward, item C, request Board of Finance for funding. We touched on this. I think we touched on this during the finance review, but this is for
Sorry,
the
Catherine, I
second.
didn't see that item when I commented earlier. Or I would have waited.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, I was like, all right, but
Probably right over it.
yeah, so we did briefly talk about this, but this is the on the agenda because we are going to be requesting the additional $100,000 that was previously approved in the CIP budget. And the plan is that it's on the agenda for tomorrow night's Board of Finance meeting. So that will get voted on. The vote is to make the request to have it go to town meeting. And as with Erica's update earlier, she did get information clearing it with legal as far as process goes. So I believe we're good to go. It's on the agenda for tomorrow night's Board of Finance meeting. And that's all I have for an update there, unless, Mike, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to apologize for the confusion earlier. When I issued the agenda this afternoon for the Board of Finance meeting. It was not on it, but as I hit send on the email, I got an email requesting that it be added. So I then revised the agenda and sent it out. So that's what created the confusion earlier. I just want to apologize for that. It did go out in the agenda that was published publicly today in advance of the meeting. So we are in proper order for the meeting tomorrow night.
All right, thank you for that.
So that speaks to how hot off the presses some of this information was. Catherine, because our advice from our attorney was that we continue with all of the same steps that we did before we go through the process, I'd like to make a motion that we formally request from the Board of Finance $100,000 of funding from the 22-23 CIP plan.
Second.
Okay, so discussion? Ralph?
We're gonna have an outline of what that 100,000 is for?
It is outlined in the request to Mike. Basically, it's for additional site appraisals, additional legal fees, architectural engineering services and other consultants, and then consultant to review potential use of existing schools. Yeah, so it is in the email to Mike, which I believe he sends to the entire Board of Finance committee.
So I just want to clarify for this board, we kind of moved quickly at the last minute so that we could get it on the agenda. If this board had moved in a different direction, we get to Board of Finance, we would just basically say, you know, we have no further conversation right now. And so better to have it on that was publicly noticed than to have asked them to add it at the last minute. So because it's either means asking them to hold a special meeting or waiting an entire month, we took that proactive step of getting it on the agenda. Worst case scenario, we said, sorry, we don't actually need to talk to you tonight.
Anything else? Any other discussion? We have a motion on the floor. We have a motion on the floor for a vote after discussion is complete. Ralph, did you have anything else?
No, I don't think so. But prefer to see item D come up before this, but that's okay.
All right, so let's take a vote. So all in favor of requesting for the Board of Finance the additional 100,000, say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. All right, next item, consideration for hiring an architect with historical building experience. Ralph? Believe this
Well,
one.
I'll get on my same soapbox here. I think that when we go to the townspeople with our options, we need to have some schematic plans to show them what their money's going for. And I don't think that thumbnail sketches are going to cut it. And I think that an architect with some historical building experience could go a long way to formulating a schematic plan for Hall so that we can fine tune the cost of doing a reconfiguration and addition. Still think we need to go there.
Thank you, Ralph. Any other discussion? I mean, I will make a comment. I think Ralph's got some good points with that. However, that comes with a cost. And I guess I'm not sure that it's warranted at this phase of the process, especially knowing how much it's going to cost to hire an architect for a schematic design. That's what we're looking at. We could be upwards of 100 to 500,000 just to get a schematic design put together. And so let me just clarify, Ralph, you're saying that we need, you're recommending that we get an architect to detail reconfiguration, perhaps for Hall and for a new school? That's my one question. And then the second question is, when, are you saying before we go public at all, or just before we go to the final vote?
I think that we need to present something to the townspeople and get their feedback on the various options, the two options that we're looking at, before this committee makes a decision as to which option we're going to bring to referendum.
Okay, we are doing that. That's going to be part of the presentation that Scott Scott's presentation is going to be going to the public with that. That's the
I have
present-
not, Scott is going to present to the public. I've seen some
Right,
very
in
loose.
his office. Yep, you've seen some options in his office. He's going to detail, he's going to send it to us next week. We're going to offer some feedback, and then the following week is when we plan to present it publicly.
Okay,
Or
and then I
he plans to present it publicly.
Okay, and I suspect when it does get to that point, it will be too late. So, all right, fine. If this is the way we want to handle this, it's not the way I think we should handle it.
Well, maybe if you're pushing to get a architect on board to do this detailed work, maybe the approach would be to ask the rest of the committee, what do they think? Are we interested at this phase of the project to be spending another 100,000 to 500,000?
Where are you getting your numbers, Catherine?
That's the range for schematic design. I'm in the industry.
Well, I don't know that we've done. Do we have any proposals? No, we don't. So,
All right, let's open it up for a discussion. Peter, I saw your hand up earlier, so go ahead.
go ahead. Let
Thank
everybody else chime in.
Peter, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Catherine. I want to agree with Ralph. I think but I want to expand beyond what he's saying to us. I think it's important for us to pursue what was asked of us in the town meeting, that we pursue both projects and present both projects clearly and coherently to the town. So I'm going to move that and I recognize what you're saying before I make my motion, Catherine. I too am, no one's more conscious of cost than me. But I'm confident that Scott can manage this in a way where we achieve something that's cost effective, but also something that provides the additional concept detail for both projects that we need, and both, not just renovation, but new. Because I think it's important for the public to understand that we're moving in an even-handed fashion. So to that end, I move that we direct our consultant, Scott Pellman, to obtain cost estimates for a more developed concept plan for each project, new and renovation, and make those available to us at our next meeting. If I can speak to my own motion, I think the intent here is not to spend $500,000.
There's no second yet, Peter. Your motion doesn't
Oh,
have a
I'm sorry. Thank you, Erica, you're quite correct. That's my motion.
Okay, so you're moving to direct Colliers to obtain cost estimates for concept plans for both new school and hall school options.
And a renovation, are two charges from the community.
Renovation. Okay. Would you mind,
Second.
just for the record, Peter, can you just repeat it one more time? It complete for our.
I didn't write it down, but I
mean, I can repeat it, but.
Oh,
go ahead.
okay. I am moving that we direct our consultant, Scott Pellman, to obtain cost estimates for a more fully developed concept plan for both new and renovation at Hall School projects.
Okay, thank you. So there's a motion. Is there a second? Okay, Mike seconded.
Mike will second.
All right, and let's jump into discussion. So I see a few hands up. Let's start with Erica.
right, so our owner's project manager is in the room. We've talked to him before. Ralph, the agenda item was to hire an architect with historical building experience, clearly lean towards one way or the other. So I want to make sure we are going and then looking at both avenues. But we have $27,000 left to spend.
Yeah.
Actually, I believe it was 17 and even less than that because there's about 5,000 that hasn't been encumbered. We don't have any more money to spend. We don't know that the public is going to give us the 100,000 we've expended. Scott, can you remind us what Mansfield or any other project you've worked on in recent time has spent to bring drawings pre-referendum?
Yeah, Mansfield, they did hire an architect. There were not necessarily schematic, there were a higher level concept plans done. But the approximate, without having it in front of me, expenditures for Mansfield to get their project to referendum was just north of $300,000.
But that was not that. Do you know roughly what the concept plan portion out of that was, or was that the 300? That was the total, right?
That was the total cost. It was definitely north of 100,000, maybe 125,000.
And that was for one project.
That was for one project, and it was a colored floor plan that in essence had the boxes organized, hallways, things like that. Now, again, to achieve that, you're going to have to go out for RFP because it's above your town threshold. I'd be happy to put an RFP together, but you're going to have to put that out on the street, advertise that as an RFP with fees, probably give architects 2 to 3 weeks to turn that around, get that back to the committee, evaluate it, and then select an architect and then task them, with the two, I will say, higher level concept / schematic plans.
I would say in between there, Scott, that's a great timeline. We have to procure funding for whatever that total is before we could ask someone to do that. And it's asking you to do that still within your scope of work with us now.
Yes, I would write an RFP. That is absolutely one of the aspects of our scope of work that we will provide. Yes.
Thank you.
Mike?
So hang on, I'm just gonna see if I can unraise my hand. There we go. I think I've kind of hammered on due diligence, especially in the land assessment subcommittee, particularly as an example with the Youngerman property, because my feeling is if we're going to tell the taxpayers that we're asking you to spend a lot of money and we want you to go this route or that route, particularly if we're telling the taxpayers we believe for good reason that we don't want you to use something we already own, then part of our due diligence is to have as well-researched answers as we can reasonably do in the time and budget we have. I know that's a lot of fact conditions. So what that means to me is I think there should be some effort in this area. What level we can go to and how we fund it is definitely a challenge. But I think this effort needs some consideration. Even if we cap it at a certain dollar amount and say, we're looking for people to provide proposals essentially on what their hourly rate is for this type of work for a project up to an example of say $50,000. I don't know, just making that number up. Whatever it is, I'm putting discussion because I really think that when we tell people, if we tell people that your option to leave Hall School behind is for these reasons, and the report that Scott did earlier is very compelling about the concept financials. I think we also need to have something a little deeper to say, this is why we really think Hall School is a good or bad idea. And I'm not sure how we get to that answer. I'm just saying, I think we have to take some of this path.
Thank you, Mike. Anne?
I think that before we involve somebody with that level of expertise and cost, I think I would rather, maybe work with Colliers and come up with with some kind of designs that we could take to the public. And then if we do choose to renovate Hall, then at that point, we could bring this person in at that cost and use that as part of our architectural designs.
Thank you, Anne. Gary?
I'm really torn on this one, to be honest. I could see both reasons to do it and reasons to not. I will, make one observation though about something that Peter said about bringing two options to the taxpayers. That's not what we were charged with. We were charged with bringing an option to the taxpayers. Now, for referendum anyways. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't do some outreach and ask folks what they think about the two directions that we're looking at. That's for sure, right? But in the end, there's going to be one option. So I just wanted to say that, and I don't know if that's what Peter meant or not, but I think there's reasons to, as we've said, there's reasons to look at, I guess, like Mike said, to look at both and to think more critically about and to be able to explain that better to the public about what each option entails. But I don't want to spend money unnecessarily, and thinking about paying somebody hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially for a detailed site concept for something that we're not going to use. I'm just not sure how I feel about that. So I guess I'm thinking out loud here, but those are things that are going through my head.
Thank you, Gary. I echo your comments. I'm kind of on the fence about it myself for those very same reasons. Erica? Oh, Erica, unmute.
Sorry, we know, how common is this? We know Mansfield did it, and I know we get to make our own decisions, but how, based on your experience, is it 50-50 that communities will spend money to take this extra step? Are there and others that wait?
I'm sorry, Eric, is that a question of myself?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Scott. That's the muted part. So to you, this is the work that you do. So you work with a vast variety of communities. Someone like a Mansfield, where maybe there's a little bit more funding availability than a different community. Is there kind of a percentage you could give us on communities that go in this direction pre-referendum?
Not really. It's I think taking it to the extent, if I understand what Ralph is looking for, I think that would be probably on the lower end of that percentage. We don't see maybe it's 50-50, and sometimes it's assistance in finding the right site. There's other parameters where in a lot of instances, instead of an OPM, architects are hired. But historically, budgeting, scheduling from architects has left projects that we've come into later in disarray. So at this point, not only is it financial, but it's also from a timing standpoint to get the funding approved to hire someone. Certainly, I understand Ralph's desire about somebody who knows historical preservation. However, the key here is someone who understands the dynamics of how a school goes together and adjacencies an educational program. Renovating or restoring the outside of the Hall Memorial School to reflect its historic nature, maintaining, repointing brick, restoring woodwork is really something that I think any of the very qualified architects that do school construction in the state of Connecticut could absolutely accommodate for the town. You're not doing a historic preservation on the inside of the building where you're restoring detailed architectural elements. In essence, you're gutting it and trying to take that frame and turn it into a school that supports 21st century learning.
Thank you, Scott. Peter?
If I can speak to my own motion, thank you, Catherine. I agree with Mike and Anne. I think some extra due diligence is warranted here, just from a reasonable person standard, for someone to understand what these numbers Scott presented tonight in his spreadsheet represent a rendering of each project and some sort of basic plan, floor plan of each project, I don't think is unreasonable. And I don't think we're asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars of work, with all due respect to the industry. I would think Scott could use his own resources here and probably go outside if he needs to for some of the historical aspects, not to repoint the facade, but to integrate it into a new school on that site would be useful. And I would like to see what Scott comes up with. I think he knows our intent. If Mansfield spent about $100,000 on this, perhaps we can spend 50, 25 for each. It seems like that would be money well spent to me, and I'm perfectly willing to defend it tomorrow night with the Board of Finance. Thank you.
Bill?
I gotta be honest, I'm really confused about why we're talking about this. I think we hired a Colliers to help us with this purpose. Scott has done the work that you're talking about hiring someone else to do. Maybe you're just asking, can we see the concept plan? To have Scott do an RFP for money that we don't have, to hire someone else to do the work that Scott has already done is insane to me. That's just baffling. If you're asking to see the concept plan that he created with me, where we put boxes into a plan to get rid of a single loaded corridor, I don't see why we can't just do that. If that's part of what you want to see for due diligence, to go and hire another architect to do, you're calling it a concept plan. To me, if you're talking about the outside, Scott to just address that. It's his profession. He gets it. If we're talking about the inside, he just nailed it perfectly. We are looking for a 21st century school inside and out. The brick, the outside would remain. The interior needs to be 21st century. So to do that, you're putting boxes within a box, exactly like he did for a new building. And so for us to spend additional money, number one, that we don't have, and number two, that he's already done the work on, is just baffling to me. The second thing I want to say is Fryer has already said this. Fryer said when they did their report, if you are going to do a renovation of Hall School and you want to change hallways and big rooms, you are going to gut it. And do we need to pay another architect to tell us the same thing? I must be missing something on that.
Thank you, Phil. Mike?
Thank you. To some of the comments of minimizing the impact on this, and especially the idea that we might possibly be able to work within our contract with Colliers to essentially add some additional services, I think that's an option worth exploring. It may be more timely and fiscally sensible. To Phil's comments, I understand what you're saying. Maybe we are missing some of the information that you have because you have worked hands-on with this stuff. You have seen stuff that we have not seen yet. So maybe we're missing something. Knowing that you have that, if I hadn't known you had that information, I would say the comment that it's insane is sort of inappropriate, because we're trying to grind our way towards due diligence in my mind. However, you know things we don't know. So I'll save my judgment on whether it's really insane for us, I guess, needing to see more of that information so that we know that maybe we don't need to go down this road. But we have been talking about this for months, and some of your comments, Phil, also, I think, are predicated on the fact that Hall School is just not an option. And I don't think this committee has been working under the assumption that Hall School is just not an option. The comments you just made about the Fryer report and all that other stuff, saying if you want a 21st century school, you got to gut the school. I understand those comments are all out there, but we as a committee have not eliminated Hall School as an option at this point. So we can't predicate our decisions based on that until we make a decision that Hall School doesn't work for us. So I think what we're trying to do is find the ways to make that decision. And maybe this helps us get to that point, or maybe, as you said, Scott's group has done enough of this work already and we just need to see it. And then we realize, oh, wait a second, we have enough now to make a more informed decision. But right now, this committee is exploring two options. So we have not eliminated Hall School as an option.
I don't think,
Thank you, Mike.
I don't think that eliminates it as an option, Mike. It's just showing the concept plan. 'Cause
Right,
it
but your
does
comments
work.
were essentially, we've eliminated Hall School as an option, not the.
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. That's not my comments. My comments.
Okay, maybe I
are-
misunderstood you.
No, my comments are, this came through Ralph. Ralph has seen the concept plan. Ralph went to Mike's office to see the concept plan. If this committee is looking to see that information, let's ask for that information and not spend more money to do it, because that will help you make your decision. I'm saying we should not spend additional funds for something that's already been done as part of a contract we've already paid for.
Okay, so some of the feeling I've gotten from Scott in the past was he wasn't going to go far down this route. So again, maybe there's some misunderstanding about what's been done. So it probably is beneficial for all of us to get all that information in front of us, so that maybe 3 of us are asking for something that's already been done and we don't need to. 3 others of us are misunderstanding what information is out there. I think maybe that's part of our problem.
May I speak, Catherine?
I'd like to add something. I think the real question for the committee, if we are going to go to a vote on this, is will having detailed or a concept plan ready to present to the town's voters, is that going to make a difference in their vote, or is it really about the numbers? Because, I picture myself, how am I going to vote as a townsperson? How am I going to vote? Maybe because I'm in the industry, I know what to expect. I know it's going to, whatever option we choose, it's going to be amazing. So for me, it's going to be all about the numbers. But for someone else, maybe it's not about the numbers. Maybe it's about the concept plans that Ralph is talking about. But I think we all need to ask ourselves, what is our decision going to be based on? And to Phil's point, and to, I think another member, Gary might have mentioned it, do we spend the money? I mean, if it's going to be upwards of 300,000 that we don't even have, how do we achieve that? And then one last thing, to Mike's point, I agree that there's some due diligence that has to be done. I'm just, 1, not sure about the timing. And 2, I don't know what we're going to get for $50,000. We may get 2 lines on a drawing, but I don't know. We can't half do it. We can't say we're only going to do it for Hall. We have to do it for both options. And I just don't feel like the money is there. I don't feel like this is going to be how the townspeople are going to vote. But those are my comments. Peter, go ahead.
I just wanted to build upon what I said, including your comments, Catherine. And I would accept a friendly amendment along the lines of what Mike was suggesting, that to do some additional due diligence on both potential projects, that we ask Collier to work within his contract to do that. I think he would understand what we're trying to achieve here, not spend a lot of money, work with his contract, within his contract, and allow people to have a reasonable understanding visually and schematically of what each project represents. I would even be agreeable to that, including a cap. So Scott has some idea, or let Scott suggest the cap, because I think he understands what we're trying to achieve. We don't want to spend an inordinate amount of money, but we would like to have, because I agree with Gary's comment also. Yes, our charge is to bring a final project once we've gotten the input, after we've met with the public in several public hearings and so on and so forth. But remember, when we were refused the first 100,000, it was Scott who kind of pulled our bacon out of the fire and recognized the town wanted this twin track approach. That's why I think it's important that we take this extra step, and essentially why I agree with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Question for you regarding process. Are you keeping your motion on the table, on the floor? Sorry, on the floor for consideration, or are you withdrawing it and making a new motion, or do we just simply ask Colliers, please do a further research, and if it's going to impact your contract, please let us know what the cost is. I mean, maybe it's as simple as that. I don't know.
I was my answer, Catherine, is I would like to leave my motion on is it the floor or the table? I don't know.
Floor.
But floor, thank you. But I would like it to be amended in the manner Mike suggested, so that Collier has the direction you just alluded to.
Okay. Let's hear from Mike, and then we'll go to Erica.
Thank you for that, Peter. I think that may be a good thing. And depending on the wording of the original motion, which I can't remember exactly now, we might have to take it off the floor and redo it, because Catherine, could you reread it?
It says move to direct Scott with Colliers to obtain cost estimates for concept plans for both new school and hall school renovations. So it doesn't say hire an architect, it just says.
No, I left it open-ended purposefully.
Okay, so that's good.
Paying cost estimates.
Okay, so I think one of the things that makes this really timely tonight is that we've talked about this for a while, and we've talked about it being too early at some points to get into this. And now we're at a point where it's almost too late based on timeline. So we can't really delay it any longer if we're going to act on it. Regardless of what our action is, we need to pick a direction on whether we're doing this or not doing it. And to end up in a position where we held off because it was too soon, and then, oh, now it's too late, is not the best management of our process. So I think we need to make some decisions and pick a path tonight. I think that working through Scott is an excellent way for us to be timely and fiscally sensitive. Again, as people are saying, he knows where we are. And apparently from what Phil is saying, as I understand it better now, he's probably done a lot of the work maybe that we're looking for. So maybe this is part of a logical extension of the work he's doing with us. I don't think we should be looking at like the stuff that you and I work with, Catherine, the $100,000 to $300,000 to $500,000 stuff. I don't think that's the kind of thing, the detail that we're talking about here. And the last comment I'll make is I also feel like probably the better option in the long run, because I work in this industry too, is a new building. But my job on this committee, as I see it, is to not only use the knowledge I already have, which tells me a new building is probably better, but to also be able to look the taxpayers in the eye as the representative of the Board of Finance and say, I made sure we did our due diligence, and now we've done our due diligence. I think option A or option B is the right option. And I do agree. I'm working on construction projects at Pomfret School and at the Rectory School right now, and all the renovation projects are incredibly complicated and expensive. And there are constant contingency issues because we find new things. But I just want to be able to make sure that we can tell the people who aren't in this industry, here's why we're going this way.
Thank you, Mike. Erica?
Thank you. So I have two questions. First one, Catherine, you could probably answer this. Peter asked for concept. Ralph was asking for schematics. Are those two very different things?
Once again, schematics are more detailed than concept plans.
So Peter has said both. Ralph was asking for schematics. My second question is to Scott. Do you already have concept plans for our two projects?
Yes.
Well, I have very high level, and I think the committee's seen some of those graphics. They haven't seen the test fit that I did, with Phil of the, the original ed spec. And, the only reason we didn't release it earlier, and I was being sensitive to Phil and the board, is because the test fit we did in the building was for an ed spec that still hadn't been formally approved. So it would have been inappropriate to start publicizing spaces and configurations of an ed spec that, again, we were just sort of testing what we could fit in the building. Now, the drawings that I've utilized for that process have just been scanned PDF images of your existing floor plans that I put into scale and then drew over in Bluebeam, if people are familiar with that. You know, these are not done in AutoCAD. These are as close to scale as I can get. I mean, I feel very comfortable that they are to scale drawings, but again, they're very high level concepts and they're very rough. You know, I would need to understand the extent of what you're looking for, you know, graphically. The problem of having an image, you know, and I think, you know, we'd all love to see three-dimensional images of this beautiful addition onto Hall School, or what a beautiful image of the new building would be in a layout. But the problem is, if you're going to go hire an architect, you're not going to give the architect that image and say, build us this building. You're hiring an architect to you know, that you've gone through the process of vetting qualifications and then hiring an architect who specializes in school design to design you a facility. So I will say, you know, 99.99%, if you developed a concept sketch or a plan, ultimately the final plan that the architect you select for either the new building or the renovation will most likely be very different. You know, what we did is we looked at feasibility, you know, what will fit in here and what won't. Then we've looked at all our historical data, all the projects that we're currently constructing, and said, okay, we can get X amount of square feet in the existing building. We know we've got to add on X amount of square feet. So again, it was a very high level concept to say, and would that X amount of square feet, and it was, you know, sort of the second generation of this was based on Ralph's suggestion, which I thought was great. Let's go 2 stories, which allows us to demolish that other academic wing, freeing up some space for an auditorium. But again, that's the extent of these. So are these polished, well-refined drawings? No, they're not. Are they drawings that we can safely say this 800 square foot classroom fits within this space of Hall Memorial, and we have our 8th grades adjacent to, and we have our science room that has its science preps adjacent to it as needed, and our STEAM room and other things organized within the existing building footprint that makes sense educationally and programmatically. And then we have an addition here to the right. So if that isn't sufficient, and I know, you know, Ralph and I think others have wanted to take that to the next level, you have 2 options. Colliers, we do have an architectural firm that's tied in with Colliers Engineering and Design. I could reach out to them and ask them for a quote to provide concept plans. However, if you really want something further developed, are you going to be satisfied of them sketching over PDF copies, or are you going to want somebody to come out and physically measure the building and do a 2-scale detailed drawing of your existing building? You know, that expense alone is quite an effort. So I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to put a proposal out for architects to provide a concept for Hall Memorial and for a new school. But with the understanding that most likely that new school and that image and that plan they develop may not be what you ultimately build. So you're just producing that plan so you can show something graphically to the public, but it's not going to change the cost. It's not going to change the schedule necessarily. And it's not going to change the impact to the students on either building new, which can be an advantage because you're not renovating with the kids in the school, or renovating the existing school. There's pluses and minuses that, you know, Phil and I, we've been working on in this presentation. What are the advantages, disadvantages of each option? So it's not just necessarily cost, but it's also what's the final educational product? What is the impact to the students? And then certainly, absolutely, what is the impact to the community from a tax standpoint? You know, so there are factors. Cost, absolutely. Number 1 is going to be the cost factor for the town to consider. 2, educationally, what are you getting for your dollars? The educational outcome of this, how does that meet the ed spec, and how does that translate to 21st century learning? And how will that building support the community for the next 50 years? Producing a sketch which may or may not be built, I'm not sure that's the best use of the money, but I'm your owner's project manager. I will do whatever you direct me or ask me to do, either doing an RFP or, again, happy to try and get a proposal to see what a next level of development could be.
So
Thank you, Scott.
Can I finish, Catherine? I apologize. So
Well, there was somebody else that raised their
that
hand.
he
in
was in the
consideration
middle of
of-
my questions with Scott. Can I finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
So that answers a lot of my questions, but I think it's very clear that a couple of our members have a very specific idea of what they want to be able to move forward. I would like to see Scott's presentation, which he plans to send to us next week and then present to us the week after, before I can determine if I need more from him. I don't know that I need more. I think it's very clear Ralph wants more, and he knows exactly what he wants. I'd like to see what Scott has to offer before I think we need more. Maybe it's going to meet the needs of this entire committee. That's my feelings.
Thank you. Peter, go ahead.
I'd like to speak to my motion if I may, Catherine.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hopefully for the last time and simplify everything for all of you. It's abundantly clear that there's just large scale opposition to the idea of doing this additional due diligence, as Mike has described it. Scott just explained to us all the reasons why it's a bad idea. Catherine, I think you yourself are very opposed on a cost basis. It's also clear, I think, that our committee's not interested in pursuing both projects. That's abundantly clear. Therefore, I respectfully withdraw my motion. Thank you.
I believe the second has to be withdrawn for that to happen. There's a second.
If the motion's withdrawn, there's nothing to second.
Correct. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Peter. I'm not sure. I agree with your summary of why you're rejecting or withdrawing your motion, because I think there were some members on the committee that do feel we need to take that extra due diligence. And I think we could probably do it off of voting per se. We can ask Scott, as our owner's PM, Colliers, can you please provide us some concept plans or at least proposals from your firm without putting an RFP together? Tell us how much it's going to be and just give us an update next time we meet. I think it's that simple. Let's find out how much is it going to be. And that's what we can just request of him. We have a contract with him. He's got resources. I don't think we need to go through the RFP effort at this time, but I'd be curious to see how much it would be to do some concept plans. So those are my thoughts.
Let's
And
get that, and let's get the review of what he's done so far, so we at least know what we already have available to us.
right, which he's going to send in his presentation next week. So that ties into what Erica was saying. So we've
Right.
got a couple hands up. So we'll go with Ann, Ralph, and then we'll kindly move on.
Okay, I agree with Erica that we really do need to look and see what Scott has to present. And I have a question for Scott. Is what you've done so far at the same level that the concept you presented in Mansfield was when you began to work with the public there?
No, because that was produced, in AutoCAD. It was all new. I mean, it wasn't trying to push boxes into an existing plan. And again, to fully measure a building, develop it in AutoCAD, that isn't what Colliers does. The advantage is I designed school facilities for over 30 years. So, sort of with me, you've gotten that as a side. So I've kind of maybe pushed our scope a little further to try to help the process along. Happy to do that. But, certainly the graphic package using AutoCAD, a new building, that presentation was not, that was the next level to what I've done, just working on your existing prints that I put into a scaled format.
Is
Thank
that
you.
what we would do when we make a decision? That would be the next step, possibly when we make a decision?
I guess I need to get you even a quote from the architects that we have in-house, that another branch of Colliers that do school design. I would need to know, are you talking about a 3-dimensional rendering? Are you talking about, measuring the existing building, or are you okay just tracing over with one lines on the existing floor plans? You know, I really need to know the extent of, or what you're really looking for. And is it doing just something at Hall Memorial, or is it coming up with a, you know, concept? I took, in all honesty, I took the floor plan of Mansfield and laid it on the site just to test it, because your ed spec for the building without an auditorium is 75,000 square feet. Mansfield building is 78,000 square feet. So I said, just again, spatially, to give you an understanding of how a building of 78,000 square feet looks on that site, I put it on there with some parking, some fields. And I think, you know, the committee's seen those presentations, those colored drawings, just the site plan that I've done. You know, I'm trying to be, you know, as your advocate, and you hired us to, you know, represent you in recommendations. You know, I want to make sure that, you know, the tax dollars are spent wisely. You know, so that's why I just caution you on developing a concept, because you could put a plan out there, and we've seen it before, where even municipalities hire an architect and they do a concept plan and they do a floor plan to get through a referendum. And then you have to go back out to solicit those services again. And if they hire a different architect, or the project evolves, and all of a sudden the public is in an outrage because that's not what I voted on. You showed me this beautiful 3D image with this glass or this brick or this stone, and that's not what the architect designed. Now, the architect's new design may be wonderful, but people are locked in on that initial design that you presented, saying, this is what I voted on. I want that picture.
Right. Well,
So
that's
that's the concern I have with taking it too far. But again, I don't want to see that, you know, it's not my position to shoot this down. I'm at your, you know, I'm at your discretion. I will do, you know, whatever you task me to do, as far as either soliciting a proposal if I have a clear scope, or putting an RFP out. Happy to do it. Other you know, municipalities do it, but I'm just letting you know some of the, you know, potential pitfalls that you may run into of taking it too far and presenting an image that people may fall in love with.
Thank you, Scott. Ralph?
Finally, okay, sorry, Scott. All right, I understand what you've done with scans of existing plans and working with that, and, you know, scaling them to be reasonably accurate, plus or minus a half a foot. Okay. I do that all the time with some of the design work that I do. I will scan or embed a PDF file into AutoCAD and work with that. What I'm suggesting is a tad above a concept, but really not necessarily schematics where we're showing elevations of all the sides of the building, a three-dimensional rendering. That's not exactly what I'm seeking here. But I would like to see what the overall plan, including the existing building, looks like, because, believe it or not, some of us may have some suggestions how to alter those plans to facilitate construction and possibly reduce the cost. But until we have something to look at, we can't do that. Now, as far as, I'd like to actually make two motions at this point, but first thing, I'd like to reinstate Peter's motion, but not to the level of an AutoCAD drawing. Working with PDFs, a marked up PDF, showing the room layout, showing the corridor layout, showing the entrances, showing what changes within the existing hall footprint. Fine, let's do that at that level. And I think you understand what I'm saying, Scott. Now, all right, so I want to reinstate Peter's motion, but to that level. And you can reach out to the architectural group within Colliers and see what cost would be to get to something a tad above concept, but not full schematics, not elevations, not a 3D rendering. Does that make sense?
Point of order.
Yeah, as a matter of process, Ralph, I was going to say this is an item that was brought up by yourself. If Peter took his motion off the table, so you'd have to make a new motion.
Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, so I'll move to request that Colliers produce if they have one that they can embellish a little bit to present to this committee so that we can study it and understand exactly what is involved with both concepts, new and a reconfigured hall, and give it some consideration for utilizing the wisdom that exists within this committee, but not, and then we can decide whether we need to go further with respect to the community.
I'm sorry, Ralph.
A whole motion.
I
Yeah,
know.
we need a
Right.
complete motion. Move, I wrote down, move to request that Colliers do what?
Develop a more refined concept plan to present to this committee so we can decide if we need to go farther. And if I don't get a second, well, that'll die.
All right, how about if I repeat this and then you tell me if this is right? Motion to request that Colliers develop a more refined concept plan, friendly amendment to add for both options, renovation and new, to present to the SBC for further consideration.
Correct.
All right, is there a second? Mike seconding it. And discussion, I think we've had a lengthy discussion. Is there any additional discussion based on Ralph's motion? Okay, let's take a vote. We'll do a roll call vote so that if there are any, we'll start. All right, so Peter,
Yes.
myself, yes. Scott, I'm sorry. It's getting late. I'm so sorry. Erica?
I apologize. I may have missed part of the motion. Can I ask you to repeat it?
Sure. Motion to move to request that Colliers develop a more refined concept plan for both new building and renovation to present to SBC for further consideration.
No.
Anne? You have to take yourself off mute.
No.
Brianna?
I'm going with abstain on this one.
I think Ralph, you made the motion. So Chris?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
And I think that's it. Right?
You should hear Ralph's vote even though. he didn't
Actually vote.
Ralph, did you
I
vote?
will vote.
Are you going to vote yes, Ralph, on your own motion?
Of course.
All right, and I think I said a yes earlier. So motion carries. We have 2 noes and 1 abstention. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses. So motion carries. Now, Ralph, did you say you had another?
I'd like to make a motion to move present to speak to be the next item on the agenda because it is getting late. We do have executive session on the agenda, and I think it would be prudent for us to let those members of the public that are still hanging with us to have their opportunity to comment.
Okay. So is there a second? Second, okay. Any discussion?
Yes. Do we have anything for executive session?
We do, we do, but
Okay.
I suppose
Okay.
we.
Right.
Okay.
I just want to comment that I'm not opposed, so if people don't want to stick around, but once again, if we move this to now, and there's some kind of action that takes place after executive session, we've taken away their ability to comment on all of that. So just keep that in mind for those who do choose to stick through however long our executive session may be.
Okay, thank you, Erica. All right, let's take a vote. So all in favor of the motion to move present to speak next on the agenda, say aye.
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 Okay, any nays? I'm a nay. Sorry, let me put my video on. I'm a nay. So let's do roll call vote. Peter,
Yes.
Erica,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Brianna,
Yes.
Ralph,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
and I think that's it. Okay, motion carries. So we'll move to have present to speak next on the agenda. Are we wrapped up with this item? The consideration hiring architect? Yes, okay. All right, let's move on to present to speak. Like Nick has his hand up.
Nick Tella, 49 Myrtle. Try to read my notes as fluid as I can here. So first, how many, I know you're not going to be able to go back and forth, but the question is, how many hours has Colliers dedicated to this project? From earlier in the presentation, it seems of the 100,000 that we've may have spent already $65,000 to them. Concern is, how much of this next 100,000 is going to continue to go to them, depending on how many hours they've spent. So let's see. Can we post what the so of the $100,000 that you're going to be asking for the town? Can we have as the town? Can the town know what this dollar amount is going to be going to? Potentially any additional, I've mentioned last meeting, any additional money in the future, I'd like to have shown to the public. The estimated project numbers that were displayed earlier about option 1, 1A, 2, 2A, are those numbers given in today's material costs as far as what the current prices are? Next thing is, if we go new, which seems to be that's maybe the more logical way, are we just going to let center just go and fall apart, or are we going to turn it into a town hall, which was a question that the group had talked about earlier. So Ralph had made a good point about the hidden costs the taxpayers are going to be potentially hit with if center school situation. The presentation from 2021, slide 6, the building upgrades for center school was mentioned at $7.6 million under those material costs. Now I get that was for it to be upgraded for school, but it's a good reference point to be used if we're going to be turning that potentially into a town hall. That $7.6 million. You got asbestos and everything in there. So, I'm personally in favor of just maintaining center and hall. It seems to be the smartest way when it comes to being fiscally responsible to the taxpayer, because even looking at option 1, 1A, 2, and 2A, even with the waivers and such, say option 1, you're looking at 28 million, you're still looking at potentially anywhere from $4 to $8 million on spending at center school, because that would be new school. Obviously, we wouldn't have center anymore. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Nick. James?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Hi, good evening, everybody. James Marshall, 46 Fisher Hill. Thanks for listening. So I want to basically just make a couple of comments on the discussion tonight. And I'm coming at this from the perspective that, I'm really in support of a new school for these kids. So, my comments are basically in support of garnering public support for this process in the community to make this, to give them the information to make this, a decision that they can feel comfortable doing, and that there isn't any question that the due diligence has been done. I'm glad that you guys went ahead with some additional study through Colliers to at least provide a presentation level of a fit study for some of these options. I think it was a good compromise given where you guys are at in this process currently. Because in all honesty, hiring an architect this late in the game with your schedule for referendum just isn't going to work. So, I wish you had done it 6 months ago, as part of a larger effort, but just because I think, there is a value to having that done and be involved in how program adjacencies happen well, how, as the ed spec is developed, working with the committee and stakeholders to find efficiencies in the program that bring overall project costs down potentially, working with stakeholders to figure out efficiencies in scheduling, et cetera, et cetera. So looking at it from that perspective, I think there is a potential value or, potential understanding that it could increase things as well. But the reality is there might be opportunity for efficiencies that make this project less costly from an overall budgetary perspective. And I think for the initial upfront costs, it could have been beneficial. I am a little concerned that it sounds like only 2 people have seen this fit study on the committee at this point. I understand the concern, but all your group expertise is there for a reason. You guys should all be participating in this. I understand, again, it should be a draft effort. If that needs to be the way it is because the Board of Ed has not approved a formal ed spec, but there's no reason that I see why this full committee shouldn't be involved in that process to some degree, with Colliers in the lead, and understanding that the Board of Ed and Phil have, a good knowledge of what the educational need may be. But, you have a diverse group of people. I think all of your input in this process would be welcome. So, that's it. I also, I do wish that there would have been a lot more community involvement, visioning sessions, outreach. I think I've said it before. I think it's very valuable, and it's going to be very valuable. And I know you've got you're going to go out with a presentation, but present to speak and asking questions at these meetings is not the same as getting people involved and excited about a project. Making them feel like they have a buy-in, teachers groups, parent teachers associations, community members, even the Board of Ed participating in like a big congregatory visioning session. I think it would be beneficial. So sorry, it's been a little while since I've had the opportunity to speak on one of these. But I really do. I thank you for the work you're doing. I really hope, I do feel for my 2 sons that a new school is the way to go with 2 students in the school system now. I know the disruption that a phased renovation project is going to do and how it's going to be impactful on their lives in addition to the added costs. So, but I do think, I think there's a value of just further study. So I'm glad you guys did that. So thank you very much. And thanks for the continued work.
Thank you. Matt?
Clark, 42 Burt Latham Road. I'm interested in understanding how many public presentations there's going to be. Our next door neighbor, Mansfield, had at least 4. I would urge the committee to make at least 3 presentations. This is a big decision for our town. Biggest one we're going to make this 50 years anyway. It's the most money we're going to spend too. So I would urge you to have, I heard singular during all of our conversations, the presentation. So I don't think that's right. I think you should do more than 1. I think that it'll allow people to digest what they heard at one and come back for another. It'll allow the board and to answer all the questions that people have. I think it's prudent. And did I hear correctly that Scott and Phil refused to allow Ralph to take documents with him to look at? That's some teamwork and transparency you guys got going there. I just don't understand. We don't need, the other thing is we don't need a townwide facility study. We need to answer the question, how much is it going to cost to retire one or more of our current school buildings? And then that cost needs to be factored into the costs of option 1, 1A, 2, 2A, 2B, whatever you guys want to do. But those costs should be included. Otherwise, you're shuffling off one of the costs and not considering it. You've had 2 years to get this process started, and now you're saying it's, from what the conversation was, it's too late to get that done before this thing goes to referendum. That's not ideal. Anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else public to speak? Okay. All right, so we
Can I make a
will,
motion that we go into an executive session per CGS 1-206D, discussion of the selection of a site review language for letter of intent and title search findings, and invite Scott Pillman.
thank you. I'll second it. I already seconded it. So we'll go into executives. We have to vote, right? Yes.
Yes.
But the discussion, do we have to have a discussion on this or that's what, yes? Yeah, okay. Well, this one's a little different, so.
You have to offer it, doesn't always happen.
Okay, so is there a discussion about the motion that's on the floor to go into executive session? Okay, so let's take a vote. All in favor of going into executive session to discuss the selection of a site review language for letter of intent and title search findings, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Nay.
Who's that? Peter? All right, roll call vote. I'll go. So yes, for me. Erica?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Ralph?
Aye.
Mike?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Brianna?
Yes.
Did I miss anyone? Okay, so motion carries. We'll go into executive session. It is now 9:20. Anyone that's on the call that is not a committee member will be put in the waiting room. Okay, so it's now 9:50. We've exited executive session. Next agenda item, future business, items for future agenda. I think our next meeting actually is going to just be the presentation from Collier's with the update of partially what he showed tonight, which is the budget update, and then the rest of the presentation. So that will be the only thing on our next meeting agenda.
Catherine, would we potentially need to have the option for executive session if there are updates on potential property?
Yes, but I think the soonest we could have that conversation would be the following meeting, right? Which is,
Well, why is the presentation the only agenda item? Why can't we, after the presentation's done, can't we have more agenda or no, or it's gonna be too long?
I don't have the answer to that. I'm gonna ask either Phil or Erica to answer
We
that
can do
question.
whatever we want. I think it will be rather lengthy, Mike, so I think give
Okay.
it its own meeting. To your point, if we have action to take that would require executive session, we could put it on there. If we have nothing to take, we could simply at that point say, we don't, there's no need, there's no information here. So we can
Okay.
add it. Catherine, for future agenda, could I ask that we at some point, and maybe Scott can answer this quickly, to Mr. Clark's point, folks here tonight have heard us talking about the first public hearing. We haven't said we were only having one. We haven't said how many. We talked about having public sessions. And so I think it's important to say that. So for future agenda items, can we talk about how many about how many that would, we should be looking at. I have an idea, and it may be mine may be too many, but I definitely don't think any of us are thinking just one public session.
Yeah, any other future agenda items, Anne?
On behalf of communications, do we want to let the public know that this presentation is going on?
Yes.
So, okay, so Phil and I will meet with communications to get
Sounds
the
great.
word out. Okay.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Hey, Erica.
Yeah, and mine probably doesn't need to be a whole agenda item, just someone can give us an idea of how many. Phil?
Just a process question.
Yeah.
If you post a meeting and it's a presentation, you have to put in present to speak or give and take. We don't respond to present to speak. When we would do this for Board of Education, and I did the presentations for the Board of Education, you have to set it up in a format that follows the town process. So if you're give and take and questions and answers, and Scott and I are presenting, or whoever's presenting, it shouldn't be a posted meeting. It should just be a meeting that is presentation, information, and we can answer questions. And then you could go into, just like you do some of those, I don't even know how it works. Like sometimes Board of Finance meets right after a budget thing. That's where you would then start your meeting, and then you would go into your business.
I think it could be either way, Phil, right? So that the dialogue could be to the purview of the chair, if the committee as a whole sees the benefit of that, or it could be your agenda that's posted is presentation, and then your meeting begins, call to order, and those other things. And whether or not you have present to speak is certainly up to the agenda. It's not required on any agenda. So, but if the intent is to present to the committee and the committee have dialogue, does this first presentation, are you talking about the one at our next meeting, intend to be a back and forth dialogue with the public, or is that our first presentation to digest it? I think it depends on what the intent is.
If you're going to present to this committee, it's in public. You're going to get questions. That's your first public presentation. That's why I'm asking the question.
I think in the meeting, and I sat through Board of Ed meetings that had large presentations like that we wanted feedback for, and there was open dialogue after that presentation, and then the rest of the meeting there wasn't. So it's really however this, Catherine feels it runs. It could go either way, and it's at the discretion of the committee. So, and I can't imagine anyone on this committee would be opposed to taking questions from the public that were at that meeting. And keep in mind, we've just voted to go hybrid, so there will be people in the room.
Okay, so then that's my second question. Sorry for monopolizing here, but where are we doing this?
You think this room won't be big enough?
Nope.
We could do the library, do you think? If they're available.
I don't know. That's up to everybody else. I mean, we just need to make sure we have the technology if we want to do it in school. I just think if we are going to do the first large public presentation in multiple years here, that it needs to be in the right setting to accommodate the right number of people.
Yeah, the only place I'll rule out is the Old Town Hall, because there's no the resources aren't there. There's no infrastructure for a hybrid meeting.
It's too small also. How about hall school in the gymnasium?
So maybe we can just determine what's going to be available and what's best use.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with that. I just want to make sure that people are aware, like this is probably not going to be something we can do downstairs and here in the town office building or upstairs. I just think that we would run the risk of having lots of people and you don't want to turn people away.
Well, the library, like the lower level of the library.
That could be too small also, I'm afraid.
Hall school gives us the ability. I think Peter and I don't know if you can see Catherine, but Peter and Brianna have their hands up.
Peter?
I'm a bit confused, Catherine, and I'm not trying to extend this meeting, but this is Scott's report to our school building committee. It's the first time we're going to see it. Why is this turning into a public outreach meeting? Why isn't this just a regular SBC meeting? Scott presents to us. We have regular present to speak, beginning and end. And we get a chance to digest it before we have interaction with the public on our direction. What's different about this meeting than tonight's meeting? We're not having the public participate in our discussions of any topic on our agenda. Why would Scott's report to us be open to public discussion during our meeting beyond the normal present to speaks, which I grant you might be longer after Scott makes his presentation?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
And I weigh in, I think, I was thinking like you were, Peter. And then Phil's points are very good. After all of this time, we've now got some real information with some real numbers to
Right.
tell people you can hear it, but you don't get to say a word that we're going to
Right.
respond to, and there's going to be open dialogue. I'm not sure is the best way to go. And I didn't really think about that. I thought of it just as business. We get to digest it. And after we do, then we'll take it kind of a road show to residents. But to Phil's point,
Because we may change it once we see it.
we may, but why not hear their input before our input and their input? So if he presents, the board gets to make comments and then the public can make some comments. I don't see the harm in that. Do we not want their input?
Thank you. Anne?
Question for Scott. Scott, what was your intent? Was this designed for just us, or was it designed also for the public?
The intent was to get it to you, early for review and comment, make those changes. What I had suggested, I mean, typically at these types of presentations, if you have a quorum, if you have the whole building committee there, then it would need to be a meeting. So, my suggestion was, it becomes a special building committee meeting where it's an agenda item, which is public presentation. But it's open to the public. You make the presentation, but you really need to start the dialogue and opening this up to the people to have their input, and then the next meeting, we copy down all those questions that were posed and we respond to those. And we keep building on that. And, in the next meeting, again, depending on how these things transpire, I think we'd be looking to start to give an indication of what some of the mill rate impacts would be. So we would tell them, here we're laying kind of the ground rules. And then, at the next meeting, we understand you're concerned about costs. We're going to present what those costs would be to the mean average home within Willington. And at that point, respond to questions again in the presentation, maybe go through it again, but maybe at a quicker pace or certain aspects of it, and respond to those questions.
Thank you, Scott. Brianna?
I'm going to take another minute to think about what I was going to say, if that's all right.
Yeah, Ralph?
All right. I'm not so sure that we should be presenting to the public until we've seen what we're going to present to the public. That's sentiment.
Well, actually, what Scott has is information that we have seen. Like one of the slides that he presented tonight is one of his slides that is in the presentation.
I understand. There's still some refinement that Scott's going to do with that as well. I'd like to see what that is before it goes public, or more public than a meeting.
It's going public.
Brianna, have you
Collected my thoughts. Can't we just say that we're seeing it all together with our fellow community members?
Yes, we can.
And is there a place, I mean, I know you were talking about the agenda and having the back and forth, and I think there's a lot of important value there. So I didn't know if that was something you can put on an agenda.
Like questions and answers type of questions?
Yeah, I think there's going to need to be a time limit. I don't like to use that word limit, but I know that we have lots of townsfolk who are very passionate about this and are eager to have their questions heard and their opinions heard as well. So I don't know how we're going to handle that exactly, but there's going to have to be something there. And then the only other thing really, I wanted to say was it would be pretty awesome if when Phil asked where we're going to have this meeting, we could just simply say at the new auditorium that can see everyone that wants to meet. Just say.
Thank you.
I mean, I could imagine that's to be on this point, the conversation with the public, right? So after we get a chance to comment, I would think presentation, the committee get a chance to have its questions and answers because we're hearing it first. And then any other dialogue is between simply Scott, Catherine, and I think our superintendent, because some of those questions I think are important to be answered by him. And the rest of us are listening along with them and they're the responders to that. But that's where I said, I just don't know why we wouldn't. It's going to be a big presentation. And I get that I don't know everything that's in it any more than you do. But I think why wouldn't we want to hear their feedback at this point? This is what we've been saying. We need to hear from them before we can make an informed decision. I need to see that whole presentation before I feel comfortable in the decision I have to make. So I want to hear what they have to say to see how it might change the next time. Like Scott said, it's going to build. The things that they're going to say are going to add to what comes to us next. Why would we delay that anymore?
Brianna?
Please, Scott, don't take offense to this in any way. But when you do this presentation, it is not representative of our group because you are presenting to us as well. So I'm wondering if that might be some of the angst felt by members.
And again,
I don't
no
understand
angst
what you're saying.
intended.
Hold on, Scott. Brianna, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you say it a different way or just?
I was trying to figure out why our committee would need to have a chance to go through this before in one of our meetings in this format, before it was presented to the same people and whoever else wanted to come in a bigger way. And I don't think that that's necessary because Scott's presenting us for that way also for the first time.
Right.
So it's not really 100% representative of us even because we have to have the back and forth with him still as our OPM.
Yeah.
Okay. I heard Ralph say that he was uncomfortable with having it go without him having a chance to look at it. So I was trying to figure out why that might be the case. And
his lack of trust. That's essentially what it is.
Oh, I'm not sure about that.
Ralph, that is what it is, right? Ralph? Is he still on? Go ahead, Phil.
About what?
About what Scott is going to present, your trust but verify.
If I could, this is not my presentation. This is the building committee and the superintendent's presentation. And again, I will be there certainly in a supporting role, but really a member of the community, or what I see is Phil and probably Catherine leading the discussions. I'm there as a supporting role. My goal was, again, we're trying to develop this as quickly as we can and taking into account some of the good suggestions this evening to get this to the committee next week for review and comment. Now, if the committee doesn't feel after they've made comments and I've maybe reissued some revisions that this is ready to go out to the public, we do not want to be having these types of dialogues about the full presentation as the first notion that the public is seeing. This is really, I'm trying to pull together all the information and put it together in a logical format that can be presented to the community on behalf of the committee. And that's why absolutely I said, I want to get it to you guys so you guys can review it. This is your presentation. If you say, Scott, this is not what we want to present, please let me know. I'll modify it any way you'd like me to, but I'm just trying to pull this information together. But this is not my presentation. This is yours. And if you don't feel it's ready to go the following week, then I would absolutely not put it out there because you need to be comfortable and you need to be in agreement that the information presented you agree with. Because you're going to be meeting the people in the grocery store and at the gas station.
Right.
And you're advocates for this project. And if you don't feel comfortable advocating for the information that's being presented, it shouldn't be presented.
Thank you, Scott. I know Phil had something to say, but you know, I think it does come down to trust in a way because, you know, Phil's seen it, I've seen it, Scott's seen it. And we're not going to present something to the committee or to the public if we're not comfortable presenting. You know, so I don't know where to go from here other than we hold back, and I don't know how we if everybody feels that same lack of trust and doesn't want it to go public until everybody's had a chance to comment on every slide. I guess we could do that as a committee, but I don't think it's necessary. I think Scott's done a great job pulling together all this information that we've all seen in one format or another. He's just gotten it into a presentation slide format that we're going to be sharing it. It's not new information. This is all information that we have seen in bits and pieces along the way over the last year or so since he's been with us. It's just collecting all that into a presentation. I don't know if that helps or doesn't help what Ralph's concern was about going public, but anyway, I know, Peter, you had your hand up, and I don't know if Ralph had his hand up, but.
If I can speak, Catherine, I'm actually indifferent as to whether we're always public, and we always should be. I was just questioning why we were changing the format of our meeting in this particular case. We're always public and we always welcome input. That said, what concerns me more, Catherine, is when you say distrust. If Ralph has a contrary point of view, or Brianna does, or I do, I don't think that's distrust. I think we're a diverse committee with different ideas. And
Well, he has said
I
it
don't
before, trust but verify. So
I disagree with that terminology, and don't think it's appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ralph, would you like to speak?
I would still, you say that everybody has seen bits and pieces, but I don't think everybody has seen everything. And because of that, I think that we should vet this before we open it up to public comment. I'm sorry. That's what I feel.
No, don't be sorry. That's your opinion, right? All right, so where do we go from here? Do we just, I don't know how we present it to everybody without presenting it publicly. Does it just get me emailed to everybody?
No, I think it's part, I think what Peter's saying is just part of our meeting and only the board has discussions about it is what he's suggesting. I disagree. I think it should go the other way, but one of my hesitations on us moving present to speak was now the folks that have stuck with us on the line might want to comment on this very discussion we're having, and there's no present to speak left in this meeting. And I sure would be curious what our residents actually think about this.
Phil, did you want to say something?
Yeah. I think your point about what's in the presentation, and this is to Mike McCoo's point earlier, maybe I have the ability to see things maybe that you don't, because that's part of my job. It's just gathering information. I have a lot of stuff. I will tell you, Brianna, the presentation, you have seen 99% of it. It is about probably 60 slides. It's pictures, it's our process, it's the finances that you saw tonight. There is, I will tell you, one piece that I can think of right now that you have not seen, and that I've told you from the get-go that I will hold until this process goes through, and that's the savings. That is the only piece that is in there as a slide, and it still doesn't go into detail. It's simply about what we believe would be the operational savings in the budget. That is the only thing that this committee hasn't had discussions on, and quite frankly, probably wouldn't have discussions on, because it's not the SBC's role. That is part of the Board of Ed. And so every other slide in there, I think if you took, we were to send this out in email or share it next week, I think you'd go, okay, I get it. And that's for all members, and provide some simple feedback on things, and we could probably present it. So maybe, Catherine, you put a time frame on it, and just say, look at, if we send this out by whenever Scott said, that we, get it out to the committee as a PDF and say, please provide your feedback by X date, so we can determine if we can do this presentation to the public or not.
Yeah, actually, the more I think about it, I think we did say that, didn't we? He was going to issue the presentation next week to everybody. We were going to get comments, and then we were going to present it in our November 2nd meeting.
Correct.
I believe that's what was said. We can rewind the video after it's done and recapture it, but I don't know if Ralph was thinking something else as far as that, but Ralph, we are sending, or Scott will be sending the presentation a week in advance of the November 2nd presentation for the SBC comments. And if there's any edits, you'll have a week to make those edits, and then it goes public on November 2nd. Does that make sense?
So we're going to get it by the 26th.
Right, that's what Scott said earlier.
Okay. I won't see it until the 29th. So
Okay, it still gives you enough time before the November 2nd to offer any comments, right?
Does that give Scott enough time?
Well, the point is, there's an opportunity there for everybody on this committee to make comments on the presentation. And so how we each manage our time is up to us, right? So everybody will have,
That is really something.
everybody will have the opportunity to make the comments, and we get them back.
Well, again, I mean, I'm not in charge of the committee, but I am not going to present anything unless the committee, I would not recommend the committee presenting the presentation I'm putting together on their behalf unless everyone felt comfortable that the information was accurate and they felt that it reflected their understanding of the process and the project moving forward. So if there are significant comments that come out of the review, you're not written in stone that you have to present it.
Right, on that date. We could extend it if we needed to. Right, we could extend the review period if we wanted to.
I mean, Catherine, if you heard from more than half the committees that they didn't have time, maybe you rethink it. If the committee has time, I think, look, I'm not going to get it as soon as the rest of you or have as much time as I would like, but that is my choice. And so I don't know. I think we've really overdone this topic, quite frankly.
All right, Anne?
I think one thing is very exciting is that we'll be able to capture it on a recording. And to me, as a communications person, I think that's really exciting, that'll give everybody the opportunity to listen to it, even if they're not able to do it whatever evening we present it.
Thank you, Anne. Brianna?
Yes, this has gone on for a while. It's probably my fault. And I'm sorry to have muddied water. When I'm working with a group of people and somebody says something that gives me pause or makes me question, I try to understand everyone's perspective and find common ground. So that's where my comment began. To speak for myself, I have no doubt, Scott, that what you present is going to be information we have seen before. It might be looking a little bit differently, a little bit more polished in a PowerPoint fancy kind of way. And that's exciting to be knowing that that's coming our way. And I'm glad to be sharing that information in that way with our community members, especially the ones who haven't had a chance to join our meetings or be be up to date themselves on the information that you share with us. So I have every confidence that you'll be able to put together a wonderful presentation. And I don't question what's going to be presented at all.
Thank you, Brianna.
Catherine, what can I ask if you or the rest of the committee would be opposed to us allowing members of the public, and there's only two here, who stayed with us, that would have been able to comment on this and the rest of their comments had we not moved present to speak, an opportunity to speak?
I'm not gonna recommend that unless the rest of the committee wants to do that, because earlier on in this meeting, we got scrutinized for going so late in the meeting. So I'll leave it up to you guys. It doesn't matter to me. I don't go to bed till midnight anyway. So it's up to you guys. If you guys are okay with adding a present to speak, we have to vote on it. And
I mean, if no
I
one's,
move that we add an additional present to speak to give our townspeople a chance to be heard on this topic.
okay, is there a second?
a second.
Okay. All right, any discussion? All right, let's take a vote. So I see Phil pointing. Do you have something to say?
We have a
Discussion?
quorum.
You have a quorum.
Okay.
Oh, is that what he was doing? Okay. All
Seven.
right, so all in favor of allowing the additional members to present to speak to the agenda item, all in favor, say aye.
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 I'm an aye. Everybody's an aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? No. Okay, so let's open it up. Present to speak. Nicholas? Or anybody? Actually, you didn't raise your hand, so.
I'm
James,
here.
James,
James wants to go first.
yeah, James, go ahead.
I figured I'd raise my hand not to draw this out to make it worthwhile for y'all. James Marshall, 46 Fisher Hill Road. So my recommendation would be that you guys do need to feel comfortable and shouldn't be showing division with what is being presented. I think that can be just as simple as you guys having the opportunity to just get a look at it before it's presented and comment offline. I think that's warranted. I am excited to see it. And, I think the public is going to be eager to do that. You guys do have to have a unified front, though, if you're going to be presenting this before the public. So I think it warrants getting there before you do so. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, James. All right, any other present to speak?
Nick Tello, 49 Myrtle. So, I mean, you guys got the $60 million-ish. I mean, before, waivers and this and that, total projects between 60 to $70 million projects. Yeah, this is a big thing on your plate. You guys need to make sure internally you guys have this presentation, buttoned up and everything. Because when you go to the public, I don't think that should be the first time you guys are seeing this presentation. I mean, me personally, I would love to see it like that because it would show disorganization. But if you want to win this project over, I would not make that approach. So.
All right, any other present to speak? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. It is now 10:20. All in favor, say aye.
I'll second it. Second.
Okay, sorry, motion second. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. It's 10:20. Have a good
Good
night,
night.
everyone.